Hello, my good ones. This video comes out thanks to your support. After he died in a fire, a strange figurine revived him and gave him a divine eye of the assessment. Only looking at the subject can he get information about him. Smoke went from the window of the building and traces of fire were visible. The whole hall was in a panic and people quickly headed for the exit without even caring for each other. The administrator shouted to the guy not to stand idle and fled to the pantry as soon as possible and brought antiques. Even despite the fact that this task was absurd, he still opened the pantry and went there. Entering the main one, the hero realized that things were bad. Chen Feng realized that everything was very bad because the whole pantry is in fire. The guy do not even pay attention to the fire, took everything that he only fell by the arm. Because of the collapsed beam, Chen Feng could not help but fall and the entire antiques fell out of his hands. The guy understood that the fire was about to reach him and again collected the antiques. He said that he still needs to raise and take everything out into the street. However, unexpectedly, another burning beam collapsed onto the guy. She already caused irreparable damage to the guy. Lying in a pantry and slowly closing his eyes from him, his forehead flowed blood. The guy could not help but think about how painful he was and did not notice how the green figure suddenly lit up. For some reason, the main character sucked into the funnel. Despite the fact that the guy was exhausted, he still did not close his eyes. Despite the fact that the fire has already completely spread to the entire surface, it was an amazing one. Suddenly for himself, the whole fire around the guy parted, and he was on an unusual platform. The guy looked around and wondered where he was. He opened his eyes widely with bewilderment. At the same time, Chen Feng was in the hospital. His boss was near the bed and wondered what to do if Chen Feng is dying. At this time, Chen Feng suddenly realized for himself that he could hear his boss. He wondered what he was talking about. The boss smiled angrily and decided to shove all the blame on the protagonist. He handed him a letter with dismissal and said that Chen Feng still does not bother anyone. Hearing this, Chen Feng squeezed his teeth because he realized that Liu Junlian set him up. After that, doctors entered the ward, the rest of the doctors who removed the bandages from him and decided to check his eyes. They took off his bandages and asked how he feels. Chen Feng picked up an envelope and said that everything is fine and he has no problem. Suddenly, Chen Feng realized for himself that he was informed of all the information about the letter where he said about his dismissal. The guy clenched his teeth and a drop of photo flowed down his face. Suddenly for himself, he noticed that his second eye was lit up with a bright golden color. The guy sharply realized that he even, without opening the envelope, realized what he had seen inside and also read the content and materials. The guy wondered if he had his head, but very soon he went to the office. Liu Junlian hit the table with his fist and shouted to the main character to listen to him. The man said that a fire occurred at the auction, and the company confirmed that Chen Feng was guilty of this. However, Chen Feng was clearly disagreeable with this. The guy was surprised. After all, he felt that some light had come from his eye, and he suddenly fell ill. The guy looked at the nephritic figurine, which stood on the table, and realized that this is the same figurine of the jade and the lion that he saved that time and from the fire, and realized that this was the light from his eyes. Suddenly, Chen Feng realized that he sees the characterization of this very figurine. Despite the evil cries of his chief, Chen Feng looked into the distance. He wondered if he had problems with his head, because not only Liu Junlian does not see this figurine, but all the others too. At the same time, the guy did not know this, but his eyes returned to normal. He realized that his eyes were no longer so painful as before. He looked at the unknown picture and realized that it was a Chunjiang map of 93 years old and with a value of 1 star. The guy realized that his eye actually sees information about objects. He looked at the processing terminals and the Papier Dynasty G scene and received their data. While Liu Junlian shouted that the company had already fired him and he was useless to stay here, he understood that the Jade Lion was a real treasure on the day of the fire. He gave him the opportunity to see information about objects. Chen Feng squinted and said that Liu Junlian knows exactly who was to blame for this fire. The guy squinted and said that, in the name of his reputation on which he worked for a month, he would not reconcile with this. Chen Feng said this fire was caused by non-fulfillment of the duties of the chief, and there was no guilt there. At the beginning, at the same time, he later covered it because he did not understand why it was so hard to cope with the main character. The poor guy literally cried because he understood that he was released from the university this year. It was his first job. Chen Feng understood that in a fire at an auction, he damaged in the eye when he tried to save the property of the company. But instead of obtaining compensation, he was accused of arson. Chen Feng recalled that when his father was dying, then Chen Feng promised that he would be fine if they now ruin his reputation. No company would accept him. The guy put his hand on the table and realized that he could not leave so simply because the heavens gave him the opportunity, allowed him to have a divine eye so he would not live in oppression. Suddenly, an evil voice shouted about where Liu Junlian disappeared. Colleagues immediately remembered this voice and said that they came from the Solar Tigress, so they needed to return to work as soon as possible. Hearing Chen Fan's unfamiliar voice turned his head. A middle-aged woman in heels went along the corridor. This woman was Sun Jiani, who was the head of the company's procurement department. She was known as a sunny tigress because she was smart and strong and no one dared to benefit from transactions with her. Other colleagues began to laugh at the main character Sun Jiani went there, while others said this time not calmly. So something important happened. Chen Feng was also covered later and tried to justify himself, but he was stopped. Sun Jiani crossed his hands and said that in 3 days there would be an auction and asked if the guy could cope with him. While Chen Feng was perplexed by Liu Junlian asked if she was mistaken. The woman said that this is the best opportunity for the company to compensate for losses from the last fire, and she does not want to investigate it. She corrected her glasses and told the main character to succeed at the auction and compensate for losses, and, if he succeeds, he receives a reward corresponding to the main workers. Hearing such an offer, Liu Junlian laughed, because he understood that it was impossible to prepare for an auction in 3 days, and most importantly, the hero was really unlucky. Nevertheless, the guy agreed to this proposal. He squinted and said that he has 2 conditions. Chen Feng smiled and said that he wants to pick up a jade lion as a reward and a reminder of this situation. The second condition sounded as if he succeeds, then Liu Junlian will be fired. Such a condition, Liu Junlian was scared and shouted to the main character he was talking about. Liu Junlian said that it is just a stupid dream for 3 days from auctions for 3 days, and Chen Feng is chasing impossible. Also, Sun Jiani really wondered if Liu Junlian did not think that she knew the truth about the fire. The woman closed her eyes and realized that she simply did not want to participate in civil strife, and now in the first place, to compensate for losses. She was interested in how Chen Feng proved himself as an intern. The woman smiled and said that she did not really love the bouncers, but she admires courageous men like Chen Feng. The woman took the nephritic figurine in her hand and realized that this jade, even despite the excellent quality, was made in artisanal production, and he has no value as such. She was upset because she read that since Chen Feng wants this thing, then she has great value. Sun Jiani came close to the main character and said that he could take the figurine right now, but he is obliged to help compensate for losses. She offered him additional conditions. One of these conditions was an invitation to dinner after a successful auction. She waved her hand and left the room. While Chen Feng rubbed his head to the rest of his colleagues as a question, really, for a woman, spring came. At the same time, Chen Feng all this time hid his nervousness and wondered what was happening here. Liu Junlian clenched his teeth and shouted to the main character not to be what smug. However, the guy just spread his hands and said that he would not be equal to the loafer who will soon be fired and he must go to inspect the collection. Very soon Chen Feng was on the street and he thought about whether he should go to the famous antique market in the city. Nevertheless, the guy unexpectedly noticed a familiar face through the window. The guy squinted and realized that it was really her. At the table was a girl of pleasant appearance who smiled at her interlocutor. Her name was Gao Yunsan. The guy remembered how in his student years she was called the goddess. Chen Feng could not forget that she was born in a rich aristocratic family who was engaged in antiques and generations. Nevertheless, the guy instantly remembered that he, as an ordinary poor student, could not admit her to the end of his studies. The final result, Chen Feng decided to follow his road and not interfere with her. Nevertheless, his eyes were unexpectedly activated, which saw a three-color glazed clay bowl in its adaptation. The guy was surprised. After all, he did not understand why his eye was suddenly activated. Chen Feng immediately realized that the plate on the table was a fake. The guy looked at the girl and thought deeply. Gao Yuanshuan picked up a cup with a smiling face. The subject that was a real antiques was a brocade hiding box with low-quality patterns. Chen Feng immediately realized that this box is often used by crooks, and it seems they want to deceive Gao Yuansan. The guy abruptly went into the cafe, loudly slamming the door. Gao Yuanshuan instantly turned back to see the traffic violator. The girl immediately recognized him. She joyfully approached the guy and said that she was glad to see him, asking where he was all this time. Chen Feng said she was so busy, so he decided not to bother her. Gao Yuanshuan smiled and said that Chen Feng would not have waited for a long time, because she would now sign the contract, and they go somewhere together. The fraudster turned to the girl and said that they should at the beginning to settle all their affairs. Gao Yuansan said that the conversations are meaningless because she was satisfied with everyone and offered the price of 300,000 won. The man grabbed the box and said that he agreed to this deal. After that, he smiled and said that he had betrayed him a three-color glazed clay bowl. Chen Feng squinted and wondered if he wanted to pretend to be a kitten and defeat the lion. The guy thought about how to teach the old man. Suddenly, a mug of tea fell from the table. She was right on the clothes of a merchant who shouted loudly in pain. Chen Feng immediately began to wipe the man's clothes and apologize for his action. Gao Yuanshuan did the same. In his own commotion, Chen Feng touched the box and realized that you were the same mechanism back B. The fraudster did not lose his face and said that the most important thing is to check the ceramic cup. When a man did not notice anything suspicious, Chen Feng even grinned, because this group makes such crafts that even the difference is invisible to him. The man picked up the box and said that he would take her back to the collection, because he has other things, so he needs to leave. Gao Yuanshuan was surprised that the man left so quickly, while Chen Feng only grinned. Immediately after that, he took the girl's hand and said she followed him. Very soon, the company left the taxi. Gao Yuanshuan asked the protagonist what happened because they had already got into the car and drove several streets, to which Chen Feng laughed. After that, Chen Feng told everything that happened then. Gao Yuanshuan thanked the protagonist for the fact that he did it because if not for Chen Feng, she would waste 300,000. Chen Feng squinted and said that she was just too honest with people. Gao Yunsan said that she could not even think that Chen Feng was so well-versed in these matters. The guy asked really she personally appeared on such business negotiations. The guy was not perplexed by, as he remembered her family a huge area of activity. Gao Yuanshuan closed her eyes and said that now whatever she wants to take up for it because times have changed. The girl said that the business is full of ups and downs and who has power, he can crush people for herself, and she can simply endure the current difficulties. Chen Feng was very surprised because such a high-ranking family unexpectedly lost all the means of existence. Chen Feng scratched his head and said that he believes her. The girl also said that next week there would be a meeting for university students and offered to go together. Chen Feng was very surprised when he heard about this because he understood that even though these people from the class who always flatter the higher all the same completely discharges, but he should not turn away so quickly. The girl waved to the main character and said not to forget to call her. Chen Feng looked in the back of Gao Wen Swan for a long time. The guy smiled at all because he understood that he was not at all afraid of their ridicule. But when he was a guy, he did not want to lose his face in front of the person he likes, in his fists, and realized that for the sake of his beautiful beloved, he is ready to put all his strength, and for this, he needs a little time to stand out among all. Very soon, Chen Feng went to the Garden of Smart Things. The largest private collector completely remade the fair and called it that name. Standing before the course of Chen Feng understood that even despite the fact that there are many crafts, but there are incredibly many originals. The guy understood that even despite this, many people came here just to get rich in one night. Chen Feng looked around all what was happening around him. His eyes lit up with a golden red color. Absolutely all the products around him were fakes, so the guy simply passed them. Going even further, he once again activated his ability, but all the products were still fakes. Chen Feng laughed because he has a superverse. He is able to assess the value of antiques and simply cannot buy for crafts. In addition, this vision operates only 3 seconds and does not affect his ordinary life. However, suddenly the guy felt something was wrong. Suddenly Chen Feng fell to his knees. He wondered why he felt so sharply. He immediately noticed that the strength of vision also disappeared. The guy closed his eyes and repeated himself not to worry, because the heavens could not play with him in such an evil joke. However, very soon Chen Feng realized that his legs were not at all because of heaven, but also finished another. The guy looked at the nearest restaurant with food and realized that he was just hungry. Chen Feng recalled that he did not have breakfast today to save money, and right now he needs to go and eat. Surrounding food with the pleased face, Chen Feng realized that he did not even expect that hunger was so much ready to solve his strength. Suddenly, the guy heard loud cries. Someone accused the visitor of not paying. Chen Feng immediately turned to the source of a loud voice, an employee of a restaurant of an unknown man who accused him of wandering and just wanted to profit from a restaurant. However, regardless of how much he was insulted by the visitors, remained extremely calm. The guy was very alerted by such an extraordinary manner of holding. The waiter screamed again at the old man and asked, "Really?" He ran into a fight how unexpectedly he saw 100th in front of his face. Chen Feng said that if he should say something, then let him turn to him, and does not raise his hand to the old man. After that, he handed the bill and said that he would pay for him. The contented waiter immediately bowed to the main character and moved away from them. The old man immediately after that said that Chen Feng is smart for years, that Chen Feng was surprised. The guy scratched his head and laughed intensely. He wondered the old man touched his mind. However, very soon he waved his hand to the protagonist and said that he still has business. If they would meet fate, he would return his duty. Chen Feng shouted that he was not going to any debt needed. He did not need to run so quickly. Chen Feng smiled because he was clearly laughing that at that age he could run so quickly. However, immediately after that, the guy was wilting because he understood that he was staggered around the market, but everywhere fakes. Suddenly, Chen Feng noticed something unusual out of the corner of his eye. Someone assured the buyer that he had never been lying and that he took out that thing in excavations. The man assured that if he was deceiving, then he would not be calm of the sky. At the same time, he held a jade liop in his hands and systematically appreciated it at 2 stars. Chen Feng immediately realized that this was a real find. Nevertheless, the seller was not going to sink to his clients and said that if he could not pay now, then he should not buy. Chen Feng went to the counter and asked for how much he would sell him. The seller was very surprised that Chen Feng really believes him and asked how much, in his opinion, it is worth it. After that, the guy grabbed the seller by the shoulder and said that they should go a few words. After stepping into a secluded place, Chen Feng knelt down and said that he was offering 10,000. He was very surprised at this price, while Chen Feng said that if he has a card, he immediately was ready to throw money. After that, the seller handed the chief hero of the Jade Leopard and said that he was now his. Chen Feng picked up a rather old thing in his hands and understood that she was clearly more than 10,000, but it was all that he had. Chen Feng rushed into her gaze into the distance. She understood that this jade thing could not be called jewel, but it would be completely into circulation. Very soon, Chen Feng turned out to be an assessment of antiques in his company. The appraiser looked at the protagonist and said, to come closer to all he will now appreciate everything. Chen Feng scratched his head and laughed, and he said that this is a valuable item, but you can't call it a treasure. Suddenly, a loud voice sounded, who stopped this process and said that he wanted this item. It was clear that this man was a foreigner because he spoke English. At the same time, a tall, stately man, whom Chen Feng doused in the last day, entered the room. The merchant tried to stop his boss, who fiercely approached the company. After that, he turned to the guy and said that the gaze of Mr. Guluza aimed at the object in his hands and asked why he was still in his hands. Chen Feng squinted. After all, he understood that this is also a person who yesterday wanted to deceive Gao Yuanswan, and they could just deceive. The guy smiled and changed. He said that he would have to try because he is young and the money is so easy to earn. Immediately after that, Jiyu Luxi showed zero sign and called the price of 300,000. He was completely sure of his innocence and asked if he would sell for this price. However, Chen Feng suddenly smiled and told his boss that in 250,000 he would sell him. The appraiser picked up an object and said that if he has something to appear, then he should immediately dial him, while Chen Feng agreed. Chen Feng, who refused the proposal, calmly left the room. Leaving the room, the guy squinted and understood that now he needed to do the couple and not allow Liu Junlian to achieve his. However, the very old man, unexpected for the protagonist, approached him, for whom he stood in a restaurant. The guy was very surprised at this meeting. The old man, without opening his eyes, said that Chen Feng would be rich. The guy scratched his head and asked what he meant when he says something like that. Chen Feng squinted and understood that the path from here to the restaurant, far from close ones, wondered how it happened that they collided again. Despite the thoughts of the protagonist, the old man only smiled calmly and said that this value, which he kept a couple of decades. At the same moment, the left eye of the protagonist was lit up with a golden red color, and he was very surprised. The man presented a very unremarkable cup. Nevertheless, with further supervision, excellent engraving were visible. The guy immediately realized that this was an engraved octagonal bowl, which is almost 1,000 years old. Chen Feng opened his eyes widely because he understood that 4 stars were the highest assessment that he had only seen. Suddenly for himself, the guy remembered that this bowl was sold at the auction for 2,006 years in Sotbit. The guy understood that there was a priceless treasure right in front of him. He squinted. After all, he did not understand how such a value was right in front of him. Chen Feng wondered how and where a man is so calm in appearance. The man laughed in front of him and asked Li Chenfeng. He said that he is alone in this world and keeps this little thing on his coffin. Nevertheless, Chen Feng Pokli knew all that this bowl costs incredible 100 million, and he did not have this money right now. Chen Feng scratched his head and asked for how much he would sell the bowl. The guy said that he himself would not fit, but he can contact a company that will help. The old man opened his eyes and asked why he would not pull if the man did not even call the price. He said that, due to the fact that Chen Feng redlined him, he would offer her friendship for 250,000. Chen Feng opened his eyes wide and could not say a word. He understood that this was too incredible price, and he only earned 250,000. Chen Feng squinted. After all, he understood that this was too unrealistic price and it could be a trick. The guy smiled and said that if he bought this bowl for 250,000, then he would probably rest in his whole life. Chen Feng said he would offer 2 million on behalf of the company, and if the man agrees, he will immediately contact them. The man closed his tongue and said that, from birth, a person not rich nevertheless agreed to a deal. Chen Feng smiled and said that he would not regret and call the company. He understood that due to the fact that he had a divine eye, then this proposal as a mana heavenly. Suddenly, Chen Feng heard a loud scream that told them to stop. Gu Luxi turned to the merchant and told him to get this subject. Ziyun Xianxin smiled angrily and told him to appoint the price for this little thing and enjoy life. Gu Luxi all this time was next to him and looked at the company of the protagonist. Gu Luxi said that he speaks his appearance for the fat man. He asked, really his brain swam with fat. Ziyun Xianxin turned to the old man and threatened him. The man grinned and asked, really? He wanted just that and came close to him. Immediately after that, he abruptly, with tension of his leg, threw back his opponent, which clearly did not expect this attack. Hearing the cries of Ziyun Xianxin, Chen Feng realized that the old man is still a skilled warrior. The man said that they would move to another place and discuss everything because he was tired of these violators of calm. Very soon, Chen Feng and the old man sat in a cafe. The guy smiled and said that he would contact the company. Having called the chief, Chen Feng said he found the penultimate product. Sunjani picked up the phone and asked to tell what he was talking about. Chen Feng said he found an engraved octagonal bowl. The woman was immediately surprised and asked for really whether he was really sure of her find. Chen Feng said he was sure of this and may sign up in the Declaration of Responsibility. The guy said that they came together at a very good price of 2 million. The woman opened her eyes wide and asked, he really acquired her for 2 million. The guy smiled and said that she had not answered to take this bowl or not. Sunjani instantly said that they need to take it. The woman smiled and said that, and another transaction could not be a question. Chen Feng smiled and said that he had sent her an address and she could send money. Well, Chen Feng said that the company will send people and you need to wait a bit with what the old man agreed with. Half an hour later, a group of people approached the company of the protagonist. Chen Feng pouted. After all, he did not expect his words to really be in doubt. Chen Feng held out the bowl forward by the appraiser and told them to check. After a thorough check, the appraiser realized that Chen Feng did not lie. Immediately after that, he told his employee that there were no questions, and they take this bowl. Chen Feng smiled at all because he understood that if he continues in such a spirit, then nothing would remain from the treasures in the world. Immediately after that, the company waved a hand and left the protagonist alone. Chen Feng Luchizaro smiled at the old man and thanked him. He said that he would be glad to meet again. The old man only smiled in response and said not to worry about it, because he would still work out. After that, he held out his fist and told the main character to take it like a bonus. The guy was very surprised at an unexpected gift. The man handed the protagonist strange iron bracelet. Nevertheless, the company did not know that they were watching them all this time. Some unknown registered that the object transferred the subject. The man understood that the recipient was a young and successful auctionist and decided to check his insubdom. Chen Feng picked up an iron bracelet and asked what was behind. First, Chen Feng decided to spend the first Chen Feng from the assessment, and his eyes caught fire with a golden red light. Suddenly, the guy realized for himself that he could not read anything about this subject since he has the properties of charm. Suddenly, the guy realized that Lunci was inside that mysterious stone. Chen Feng was greatly surprised because the outside apparently was placed in molten metal. The guy opened his eyes wide and was about to ask the old man where he got this bracelet. However, Chen Feng did not have time to wake up as the old man's trace caught a cold. Suddenly, the bracelet in the hand of the protagonist caught fire with a bright light. The guy clearly did not expect what was happening. Suddenly, the dragon inside the bracelet began to transform. To the general phenomenon, the bracelet seemed to be transformed and dug into the skin of the protagonist. The guy realized that he could not remove him at all. However, the thought of the protagonist was interrupted by a phone call. The guy picked up the phone because he was already scared and looked angry at the caller. However, Sunjiani turned out to be these people. For this reason, the guy could only squeeze his teeth and calmly answer the call. The woman smiled and told him to gather and come to the office. She explained that he would be attended by a weekly meeting. Chen Feng was very surprised because he was just small trading agent, and in order to sit at a meeting from his qualifications, not that he was reaching. When the guy hung up, he smiled and wondered if Sunjiani was mistaken and decided to call her back. However, immediately after that, he received a message from her where she spoke more formally to getting dressed, as this is an important meeting. Realizing that this was not at all a mistake, Bai Chen Feng only said that today you can go crazy from what was happening. Having gathered in front of the mirror, Chen Feng said that clothes play a significant role. The guy corrected his tie and admired his appearance. After that, the satisfied guy left the room and decided to move forward. Chen Feng was waiting for me that the door handle did not open, and it was stuck. Suddenly for himself, the guy simply broke her with anger. I understand that then he still had a frightened for this door handle to pay Chen Feng to earnest, because he did not understand what was happening. Still angry, he threw a dumped pen on the floor and shouted in bewilderment about what was happening today. Chen Feng grabbed his head and then he realized on his face that he did not understand anything at all. However, the guy quickly came to his senses and clenched his fist. He thought that he needed to think what exactly was wrong. The guy noticed that the only thing that changed this presence of the same bracelet changed. Looking at the sparkling metal, Chen Feng squinted. Having scratched his cheek, the guy realized that he could not do anything about it. I go down the stairs to try my hand in action again. The guy realized that just touching a finger to the iron railing, they literally arched in the other direction as if molten. Chen Feng literally cried from what turns into a monster with an overabundance of strength. The guy decided not to think about it in advance and sat in a taxi and to start holding a meeting in the company. However, Chen Feng did not expect that he would be observed at that time. The mysterious couple Karik eyes watched the main character. Someone wondered if his boss was mistaken, all obvious that he was an ordinary person. Half an hour later, Chen Feng was in the office. The guy fled with all his feet because he understood that he had spent too much time in lines and traffic jams. With a grand scale, knocking out the door of Chen Feng finally went into the hall. The guy instantly froze, who was dead because he understood that it was extremely uncomfortable. Sitting in the hall, wondered who it was that he did not even knock the door. Liu Junlian intervened in the conversation and said that this was their trade agent Chen Feng, and he would not have prevented him from getting out manner. He whispered that it was he who was to blame for the accident and brought the damage to their company. One of the highest leaders who reported Liu Junlian asked Li Chenfeng from their department, with which Liu Junlian agreed. Liu Junlian smiled viciously because he believed that everything was already in his pocket. He deliberately apologized to his boss. However, a man, instead of supporting his employee, said that he himself could quit in this case. The man clearly did not expect this situation, while his boss said that from today, Chen Feng would take his place, and if someone has objections, he will not listen to them. Chen Feng opened his eyes widely because he did not even expect that without a dispute, the man would be fired on his own. Liu Junlian viciously pointed his finger at the protagonist and threatened the guy. Other participants in the council laughed, because they considered that that man is very suitable for him and told him to try because despite the fact that it is very young, but in appearance promising. The guy squinted because he understood that Lu Junlian was too disgusting, and now there were no more people who want to help him. After that, the head of the protagonist told him to sit near the director's son. Chen Feng scratched his head and only laughed. The man said that he already knew about his dispute with Sun Jiani and said that he would certainly have a good encouragement for everything he did for their company. Everyone in the council thought that the main character was waiting for good money. Very soon, the projector was launched, and the conference began. The boss said that since he was able to get such a value for their company, he will certainly fulfill his promise. The man said that from that moment on, the position of the chief manager can be read in advance. Sun Jiani said that after the auction ended, Chen Feng should go to her office and naturally talk. In the future, he will advance up the career ladder up. Chen Feng smiled broadly. After all, he understood that at this pace he was waiting for an increase in salaries and positions, and at the same time marriage to a rich beauty. The director only winked at the main character. The guy instantly squinted and understood that Sun Jiang was going to make him a surprise. Immediately after this, Chen Feng became from his place and thanked everyone else for appreciating him. The boss told the main character not to worry and continue to work in the same spirit. Suddenly, the man mentioned something. The man said that the leader outside the office is called a tigress and asked how he relates to this, and is he really not afraid of her. Sun Jiani said that if, after his words, she does not find a guy, then he would hang all the blame on him. Chen Feng scratched his head and said that the general director was simply the best, and laughed awkwardly. The conference continued very soon. The financial director reported that the purchased engraved octagonal bowl was sold at this time for a pre-agreed price, and Chen Feng, as a responsible for this case, would receive 800,000. Chen Feng looked at his boss, who smiled broadly at the guy. After that, he looked at Sun Jiani, who was clearly better about him than before. After that, he looked at the other colleagues, in whose eyes envy was clearly considered. The guy understood that such a miserable person as he certainly worked hard despite difficulties and complaints. Nevertheless, right now everything has changed since he has a magical eye. The guy smiled because he realized that his future looks more adventurous and exciting. Chen Feng understood that as soon as he receives the first amount of money, he was waiting for big changes. As a result, Chen Feng decided to invest this money in the GAO antiques. The guy understood that right now their business has losses and every year less and less quality products are sold. Nevertheless, the guy understood that his ability to evaluate jewelry is a quality guarantee. The guy remembered Gao Yuan Swan because he understood that the opportunity to roll up to her was not given every time and not to use her. Nevertheless, Chen Feng understood that first, you need to make every effort to work as the chief manager. After the collection of Chen Feng, his shoulders kneaded and said that this long and hard working day was finally over. The rest of the colleagues encouraged the protagonist. I clearly fall asleep with a flattery. As a result, the guy decided to call a taxi at home for the first time, feeling the taste of a rich life. However, suddenly, the guy heard the sound unfamiliar to him and immediately turned in his direction. His magic eye was activated, and he understood that there were many dangerous objects in the garbage, including knives and bats. The guy squinted. After all, he understood that the knife in the garbage bucket is a common thing, but with the bat, something is clearly wrong. The guy had nothing to happen to continue his walk, linging his ill-wishers. The man armed himself with knives and said that Chen Feng dared to roam here alone in the night. Another man took the bat and laughed. He said to kill the protagonist. Very soon, the ill-wishers immediately approached the guy. Without thinking twice, they waved their cold guns, publishing loud cries. Chen Feng squinted and almost laughed because he understood that it was incredibly miserable people. He already anticipated how he would put them on the shoulder blades. A small villain put a knife to the hero's throat and said to give money vividly. Nevertheless, it was offended by his face as he was nervous. Suddenly, Chen Feng asked them to be sent by Lu Zhonglian. Small thieves instantly were taken aback when they heard this name. The man said that he did not look at the fact that this lane was hidden in Potemki, but the public security station adjoins him. The guy understood that as a rule, small thieves, they did not bother here. Smiling, Chen Feng said that it was obvious that Lu Zhonglian was involved in this case. A man with a knife, even despite the fact that he did not believe in the arguments of the protagonist, but pulled out and the knife forward and asked, "Really?" He completely clung his head. Without thinking twice, they decided to attack the guy together. The man with a knife was behind the head of the hero and waved a cold weapon. The guy instantly activated the bracelet on his wrist and immediately increased his strength. Chen Feng waved and with a smile directed his fist to the ill-wisher. With one movement of Chen Feng's hand, he easily fell into a solar plexus to his enemy, who could not compare anything in response. Because of this movement, a knife flew out of the enemy's hands while the man himself was on the other end of the lane from the power of the blow. The man stopped literally near that garbage tank where their first meeting occurred, and his comrade was immediately frightened not by the human power of Chen Feng. After all, he understood that he could not cope with her. Without thinking twice, the guy decided to successfully retreat. However, Chen Feng smiled and asked. He really wanted to escape and chased his opponent. With a sharp movement of his hand, he gave a slap in the face of the runner. As a result, this man was in the garbage tank unconscious. Looking at immovable carcasses, the main thing, the hero smiled because he understood that not only power, but also the reaction, along with speed, increased behind the facet of human understanding. Chen Feng understood that right now he was at least at the level of a superhero. Nevertheless, Chen Feng was still perplexed why the old man gave him this bracelet. Nevertheless, he did not decide for a long time to think about it and called the police. 2 minutes later, a service car arrived at the scene. The girl officer in uniform approached the main character. The guy instantly thought about the divine beauty of the officer. The girl asked the protagonist he called her and whether he mentioned the robbery. The officer asked Li Chenfeng knows that we will punish a false call with a prison. The guy said that they were lying on the ground, so he needed to resort to self-defense. The officer was extremely surprised that Chen Feng knows how to fight the main hero, said that he had learned a couple of tricks. Chen Feng said that since the officer came, then the guy was about to leave. However, the officer said to wait a bit because she will draw up a protocol. 5 minutes later, the girl said that they figured out this business. She held out a piece of paper with a number and said that this is her business card. If something happens, then the guy could call her. Suddenly, the guy noticed how the phone fell out of the girl's pocket and bent down to raise him. Nevertheless, Chen Feng did not expect what he would see on the screen. It was written there that an investigation was underway on the prediction of the golden bracelet from the grave of the Tang dynasty. It was written that the suspect fled to this city and police officers are required to help the investigation. Suddenly, Chen Feng realized that this bracelet was very similar to the old man. Nevertheless, the guy wondered if that iron bracelet was at that time. The guy swallowed from fear coming to him and realized that the bracelet was stolen as a result, and now it is clear where such unreal abilities are where. Chen Feng raised the phone and asked if this is the tomb of the tomb. The girl thanked the protagonist. The officer said that the bracelet was found by a state archaeological expedition. Nevertheless, she said that he was not long before the plans sent to the museum. The girl asked him really have clues and said that for the country it was a very important artifact due to provision of assistance. They promised a monetary reward of 5 million. Chen Feng only laughed and hastily retreated. The guy said that he just asked, and he would go if there are no additional questions to him. The guy alone walked along the alley because he understood that she said the last phrase intentionally. The guy brought his hand to his mouth and wondered if she realized something. Chen Feng involuntarily remembered the old man and wondered. He really did not hurt the tomb painfully. The guy looked at his hand because she understood that the bracelet had already merged with his body. Chen Feng understood that the police should by no means find out about it otherwise, then he would not get into problems. Climbing the stairs of Chen Feng like the last rich, thought again, and went home along the 11th Street. The guy was angry that the lantern was burned out, and as soon as he receives the money, he would move out of this outback. However, suddenly, a child crashed into the body of the protagonist. Chen Feng was seriously scared and asked what was happening. The guy instantly found himself on the other side because he did not expect something like that. However, unexpectedly for the guy, there was a certain girl right in front of him. With the unfortunate expression on her face, she said that she was hungry. Kneeling, she asked him to give some food. Chen Feng was embarrassed because he did not understand how a girl could be so careless. While the girl approached the main character and literally snuggled up to him, the guy tried to ask her where her parents. She said that she came from the city in order to find a job, but her realtor turned out to be a deceiver and took her money. The girl said that she had no money left for the way home and was already dark. She said she was very tired and wants to eat and sleep. Suddenly, the protagonist's eyes caught fire with a bright red light, and he widely opened his eyes. Chen Feng turned to his apartment and said that if she is not afraid of him, then she could go briefly, and the guy feeds her. The girl thanked him. Chen Feng squinted and decided to smile. Entering the apartment, the guy told her to be at home and the girl agreeing to sit on the sofa. Chen Feng put on an apron and began to prepare dinner. Very soon, the girl noticed the smell and said that it smells very tasty. Having prepared food, Chen Feng sat opposite the girl and she thanked for her. Having licked the girl, really asked he lives himself and where his parents are, and also asked if other relatives in the apartment. The guy put the sticks on the table and smiled. He decided to ignore the girl and said that if she ate, then it was time for her to return. As soon as the girl heard these words, she burst into tears and said that she had nowhere to go. She asked the protagonist to spend the night only one night and said that as soon as the sun is growing up, she would immediately leave. Before you say your opinion, Chen Feng said that for starters he would wash the dishes and set to work. While the guy was busy, the girl asked if she could use his shower gel, to what the guy did not agree to. After that, she said that she washed and asked for a towel, and Chen Feng, with an angry, asked why she did not ask in advance. The guy knocked on the door and said that he laid a towel and informed the girl. Immediately after that, the door to the bathroom suddenly opened. The guy looked at what was happening and could not say a word. Behind the door stood the newly arrived, while the guy only stared at her. Lonely drops descended from the watering room of the shower. The girl turned and looked at the guy. Very soon she realized that she was completely naked in front of him and blushed. At the same time, Chen Feng also blushed because he understood that she had not even looked at the fact that by the appearance of a girl 18 to 19 years old, but her body was no different from 28-year-old. However, the guy quickly caught himself and turned back, embarrassed. The girl instantly covered herself with a towel that she had just given to her and said that she thought that the guy had already laid and left. Closing his eyes, Chen Feng said to close the door to wipe and then leave. The guy was perplexed and did not understand what this girl was achieving. Having slammed the door of Chen Feng loudly into the living room, he told the girl that he was in the bedroom to the left and she can sleep there when the guy himself sleeps in the living room. At the same time, Chen Feng could not understand why such a severity on his body and really suffering from sleepy paralysis on his body. However, immediately after he woke up, the guy noticed that the same girl who slept peacefully on him. The guy took her by the shoulders and forced her to unhook from him. After that, he lay right on the girl and she shouted loudly. "Beauty?" Chen Feng asked what she wanted. The guy said that he already showed a lot of generosity to her if she throws another trick, then the guy would drive her out. The girl barely opened her eyes and said that Chen Feng painfully crushes. The guy understood that this was his first so close contact with the girl. The guy squeezed the girl even harder, and she, blushing, told him to let him go, because her mother said that before the wedding this could not be done. However, the guy quickly realized what was happening. Chen Feng said not to pretend and tell him who sent her, and then he would let her go. The girl's face was covered later, and she said that she did not quite understand him. However, in the memoirs of the protagonist, the girl's jewelry rumored sharply. Among them was the Cartier pendant and Bulgogi bracelet. The guy understood that all her lie cracked at the seams. The girl was surprised and asked if she had hidden everything in her wallet. Chen Feng asked, "Really? She believes that some wallet will hide such things from his divine eye." Still being over the girl, Chen Feng asked if she would speak. The girl said that if she said, he is obliged to help her. She said that she had some troubles and he must help her, after which she will be completely at his disposal. The moved girls. Chen Feng folded his hands and said to tell her story, but not to deceive. His location will not return his location. The girl said that her name is Feng Xiaomin, and said that she came from a very ancient and noble family, and her elders forced her to marry her will, so she escaped. The beggar smiled and said that on the way she collided and not an old man, and he said that the girl could find the main character. Suddenly, Chen Feng asked the question, "They really talk about the same old man?" Chen Feng asked what the man said. Feng Xiaomin said she was informed that a man with a tattoo could help her get out of trouble. The guy instantly looked at his hand with a tattoo. Chen Feng instantly realized that it was the same bracelet that the old man gave him. However, the guy said that the old man deceived him, and he could not solve her problem. The guy said that if she has nowhere to go, then for the first time she could really stay with him. After such words, the girl rushed with a guy of perception and said that if Chen Feng solves her problem, then she will marry him. While the guy was already trying to object to something, the girl immediately kissed him. Feng Xiaomin, in a calm step, left the living room, while Chen Feng only tried to restrain himself. The next day, the protagonist woke his call to the phone. "He just picked me up." The guy took the call and tried to navigate. With irritation, he asked who it was. As it turned out, an officer called him who introduced himself as Main Fan. The main mood improved mentally, and he said that he only recently woke up and asked what she wanted. The girl said that she wanted him, we would end once, and asked if he could come. With a wide smile, Chen Feng agreed to a meeting. However, immediately after that, the guy realized that this was a very unusual phenomenon, that such a beautiful girl called him early in the morning. However, immediately after that, Paul Feng Xiaomin entered the living room, and the guy will literally throw the phone in sound. The girl greeted the main character. Chen Feng opened his eyes widely, as if asking why she was in this form in front of him. Still with her delights, the girl said that he had so loud phone that he woke the whole house. Having hardly stretched out, the girl said that people had not yet slept. At the same time, Chen Feng could only choke in his blood because he was perplexed why she was again in this form. With difficulty, Chen Feng called the girl and asked her not to dress anymore and never appear before him in this form. However, as if ignoring the protagonist, the girl sat on him on the sofa and said that after Feng Xiaomin marries him, he would see everything sooner or later. Clutching in her chest to the guy, she said that when he saw a little, she would not agree. However, the guy successfully caught himself and pushed the girl away from him. Feng Xiaomin only laughed because she understood that the guy caught her again. After that, Chen Feng said that he would have some things, and he is obliged to leave. The guy handed over several bills of the girl and told her to take money. He also mentioned that if she doesn't have enough this money, then the girl can find him. However, immediately after that, she was attacked by her own conscience. She did not understand why Chen Feng still continues to stay with her despite the fact that she had been deceiving him from the very beginning. Looking at the crying girl, Chen Feng clenched his fist and told her not to worry, because he would cover her. The guy looked at the girl and told her not to forget to eat on time while he would not be. Feng Xiaomin smiled and said that she is piercing, so Chen Feng can go. That soon, Chen Feng was in the coffee shop and was already waiting for the officer. However, as it turned out, the guy did not even have to wait long because she was already there. The girl said that she has a habit of coming early and the guy was not late. The girl told the main character sits down and asked if he wanted something to drink. Chen Feng refused and asked what main fan wanted to ask him. The girl squinted and said that they interrogated a group of gangsters yesterday last night. Main fans said that as it became known they were occupied by international secret organizations, they're tasked to take away the guy bracelet. The girl also said that the national treasure and the organization that is hiding behind them looks like an unwanted group of tombs of tombs. The guy looked away and thought deeply. Chen Feng did not understand how soon the girl would guess that he had a bracelet. Holding Chen Feng's wrists, all the bent, because he understood that the bracelet had already merged with his body and really could not be discovered. However, the guy quickly came to his senses and scratched his head. Chen Feng said he had not seen a single bracelet. Chen Feng laughed that most likely they confused the protagonist with someone else. The girl put her hand to her mouth, all understood that after checking them, Chen Feng was really an ordinary person. It shook his hand to the main character and thanked him for his cooperation. After that, they said goodbye. Main fan put on her hat and left the institution. The girl obviously did not expect that she would follow her and said that most likely the thread was cut off again. An unexpected girl felt someone's gaze on herself and realized that a person was looking after her as if watching. However, very soon the unknown began to escape with all his might hiding from the girl. I felt something was amiss and began to run after the unknown. However, the girls failed to find him in these alleys, and she lost his trace. Main fan understood that this business was somehow connected with the main character, as well as the question of Diro. At the same time, it was not known to go to the car and immediately got into the passenger's place. The unknown asked him why he was so long. He apologized to Pursue and said that the police officer had interrupted the surveillance and is now looking for him. The man, on the contrary, said that the bone dragon in the east is crucial for the organization. Thus, the man who was sitting opposite was Guluxi, who smiled and said that this time they should find someone who is more reliable, and they could not fail. Chen Feng said that when he saw his sister, his mood got up. The guy squeezed his hand and said that he had to return to the company in order to solve some question. In the company, Sun Jiani met him and said that everyone else went to the meeting. The guy opened his eyes wide because he did not expect this. Sun Jiani said that the main reason for this meeting is to give dividends from the auction, but the amount of money is simply huge. She dragged his hand and said that they would go there. There he was met by a boss, who said that the main goal of this meeting was to thank the protagonist. The man said that his unique vision brought their auction incredible success. After that, he handed the piece of paper the main character and said that 3 million yuan was the dividends of the protagonist and hoped that he would take them in pairs. Sun Jiani winked at the main character and handed over a piece of paper while the guy was sitting silently. Chen Feng smiled and said that when they had a meeting today, he was ready to say that he was resigned. Sun Jiani clearly did not expect this and asked for really whether it was really. Other colleagues were also surprised and asked why he wants to resign. Sun Jiani did not understand how 3 million yuan could not buy a guy. She approached him closely and asked for, "Really, this money will not work." The woman said that he was already over 20 and there are still places where he could spend money later. The guy thanked the woman for kindness. She said that he has his own opinion on this subject. The boss was clearly unhappy, but said that the guy would give his statement about the resignation to the personnel department and wished the guy all the best. The leaders looked at the back of the protagonist and did not understand why he suddenly wants to leave, because the guy did not even listen to her. Suddenly, she noticed that her heart was pounding like crazy and wondered why this was happening. With a reddened face, she looked at the guy and thought that he was part of the family. Chen Feng looked in the direction of Sun Jiani and was surprised. The guy did not understand why she was looking at him so closely. After the meeting, Chen Feng was very happy because he collected all his things and said that now it was not too late to go to the Gaojia antique store. Sun Jiang went to stop the protagonist, but here in joy he did not even notice her and sat in a taxi. The woman looked at the guy with embarrassment because he left, even did not say a word to her. Later, in the Chen Feng store, he greeted the owner. Gao Yuanshuan opened him and asked why he is here because he is such a rare guest. At the same time, Chen Feng said that he came here for her to hire him. The girl seemed to be not at all surprised and told him to go then. Chen Feng smiled and said that it was good that he brought all his things. Gao Yuansan said that it is great because her store is full of hopes. Chen Feng put a box with things on the counter and said that the old woman was sure that the Gao family antiques would surely return the fame of the past. Gao Yuanshuan wondered how they will do it. Suddenly, the guy grabbed the girl's hand and told them to walk. He squinted and said that for starters, they should go to the street Gukyu, with what the girl agreed. Already in the market, the guy and Gao Yuanshuan examined objects. Gao Yuanshuan wondered that she wanted to call the main character, but did not even think about him. The girl understood that in fact the antiques of the Gao family had long disappeared, and with his help he will finally be able to restore the reputation by thanking him in his soul. Chen Feng scratched his head and was about to say something to the girl. However, she was worried about the guy and asked him not to call her a complete name in the future and asked to call Yuan Yuan. The guy realized that this was really next to the water tower of the platform. Chen Feng smiled and said that he would call her like that. The guy scratched his head and said that he has friends in the auction house and there is a good product, so they can go and see it. The girl grabbed the protagonist's hand and said that it would be really great because this method would allow them to sell their future to develop even better. At the same time, the guy only blushed from the actions of the girl, understanding that perhaps this is precisely this and confuses the main of the hero. She asked why he had such an expression on her face because she accidentally touched him. Chen Feng smiled and said that it was obvious that she was touching him. The girl pressed her hands to her face and said that it was boring that one was right, and Chen Feng laughed. Wen Yuan asked when they would meet with people from the auction house. The guy scratched his head and said that he would call now and ask everything. In the company, Sun Jiana picked up the phone and was surprised that Chen Feng was calling her. The woman's face literally shone, and she asked why the guy calls her. Chen Feng said he missed her and asked if she was free. The woman froze in thought. Sun Jiani was surprised that he called for this reason. Having calmed down, she asked what it all means. The guy offered to meet personally and said that he was now on the street of Guvan on the second floor of Yulai Tea House. The woman smiled and agreed to the meeting. She thought the guy called her to apologize, and he did not forget to make an appointment. Very soon, Sun Jiani was already on the second floor of the institution. When she saw the protagonist with someone else, she was very surprised. Looking at the girl next to the main character, she was surprised to notice that she was incredibly beautiful. Suddenly, she dawned on her that, since he called not only her alone, something was happening. Chen Feng affably told the manager to sit down and explain the situation. 10 minutes later, the leader winked at the guy and said that the Gao family antiques is also considered a well-known hereditary family and said that she was very glad that he had chosen Gudong. Yuan Yuan instantly noticed changes in a woman and opened her eyes wide. The girl entered into a conversation and offered to sign a contract. She put her hand on the hand of the protagonist and was about to continue. The girl said that they, along with the main character, should take the gudong earlier. The woman squinted and realized what was happening here. Leaving the table, Sunjani said that she would return to the company and report to the chairman of the council. And there, she said that she would inform when the contract was ready. The guy held out his hand to Sunjiani and said that he wishes all them success in this cooperation and said that he was offering to have dinner. Sunjani said to wait for the main character until the contract is signed and said that she would contact him later. Leaving the establishment, she realized that he had quit the girl named Yuan Yuan for the sake of that girl. She was upset after all. She understood that while her feelings for the main character did not become stronger, she had to run away. At the same time, Chen Feng scratched his head and said that one girl was living with him. Anya said that she moved away from her parents, so it came out that there was nowhere to live. Yuan Yuan did not doubt the main character and said that she was sorry that at such a young age she had moved away from her parents. Chen Feng said that this is why he wants her to come to help in the store and asked her to take care of her. Yuan Yuan agreed and said that she would help her with what she could. Chen Feng and once again established himself in the idea that Yuan Yuan is the kindest person in this world. Very soon, in the antique store, Gao Jia Feng Xiaomin was already standing at the rack. Chen Feng said he returned. The girl was glad to return the protagonist, but he told her to take a new party to the warehouse and said that he would look after the store. The guy sat on the nearest chair and was glad of the first break. Chen Feng looked at the mysterious figure and realized that he had some more concern. Having scanning the figure to his eyes, the guy understood that with the growth of the value of the identification of treasures, the consumption of energy of the Eye of God was becoming smaller and less, but the characteristics of the jade lion and bracelets are still not visible to him. At the same time, Feng Xiaomin watched the main character and was surprised that he was again in the study. The girl complained that every day to dig into a bunch of ordinary goods was really boring, but she quickly threw back this thought and decided to go to the warehouse. Chen Feng picked up a figure and said that the jade lion and this bracelet are probably not so simple. Suddenly, the guy noticed that there was some movement in the courtyard and squinted. The guy left the store and wondered whose cats and the dogs would get dirty again. However, as it turned out, these were not a cat at all, but a real person who rumbled on the porch of the store. Chen Feng was very surprised and opened his eyes wide. The guy asked who he was. This is the very man with a serious expression on his face asked the guy where the bracelet was located. Swinging to the protagonist with a brand, the man said that nothing would change if he died. However, in the blink of an eye, the image of the main character dissolved in the air, and the man missed. As it turned out, Chen Feng was already over him with an evil expression on his face. The guy said that he was not given not his. After that, Chen Feng began to beat the one who came with a laugh. Very soon, he tied up a man, and he only begged to kill him or let him go. However, Chen Feng spread his hands and asked him really so stupid to let him go to kill him. The guy said he would call the police. At the same time, the next day, Main Fan called the main character. However, as soon as Chen Feng picked up the phone, she shouted to tell him the truth. The guy clearly did not expect this. Chen Feng calmed down again and said that he did not understand something. Main Fan asked, really? He does not know who she was deceiving. The girl's face became serious, and she began to tell him about the situation. It turned out that the man who was brought yesterday was sadly known, and when it was a professional hired killer in France. The guy clearly did not expect this, because such a person fell literally from one blow. The officer reproached the protagonist to himself, and he said that she was thinking too much. The girl asked, is he not even going to clarify the situation? However, Chen Feng said that this was really nothing, and all that he had to say he had already told. After that, she threw the phone with furious cries that if he does it at least for himself, she believes that he is not alone. After Main Fan hung up the phone in the shop, stood in complete silence. In the first, I spoke Yuan Yuan, who asked if everything was in order with the main character. The hero asked what could be the matter, because yesterday the bottomless robbed the east and the west, and the police would like to know some details. Feng Xiaomin laughed and said that if someone touches her brother to the main character, then she would beat him, for which the guy laughed. Chen Feng smiled and said that the profit this month was again doubled by them to celebrate this. Yuan Yuan said that they really should do this and invited everyone to karaoke for dinner. Very soon the company went to karaoke. In a private room, they began to listen to music. The girls sang some kind of song, but very soon they asked the protagonist. The guy picked up the microphone and said that the king of the song is here. After that, the guy began to sing, but everyone immediately found out that his musical abilities were gently to say, terrible. After 10 songs, the guy lowered the microphone and said that he was everything, and Chen Feng was becoming. Chen Feng deeply thought with the words of the officer because he was worried about the last phrase. The guy thought about it because this could be a serious problem for Yuan Yuan and Feng Xiaomin. The guy looked at his wrist and thought that people were discussing behind him. At the same time, the same observer said that before that, the enemies underestimated them, and he did not think that the bracelet could merge with him so quickly. The man said that he could not get a bullet that flew away 500 meters. Still watching the object, the man said that the sniper is in place. The sniper aimed at the window of the protagonist. Having directed the muzzle of the pistol to the protagonist, the man said that the goal was discovered. The slightly calmed Feng Xiaomin pressed against the main character and asked why he was sitting here and cleaning the fruit. The guy asked, "Really? She drinks alcohol." She pressed herself against him and thanked the guy for not turning away from her. Yuan Yuan instantly realized that the girl drank a liquor. At the same time, the surveillance still continued, and the sniper opened the eye as evidenced by the reflection from the sun. Very soon, Chen Feng set to drink. Feng Xiaomin pressed him with her whole body and asked Li Chenfeng, while Yuan Yuan thought that she was getting closer and closer, that she was worried. With a reddened face, she said that she fell in love with the protagonist at first glance. Hugging the guy, the girl carefully hung on his shoulders and laughed to call the guy sweet. Chen Feng smiled and asked if she was drunk. However, the girl grabbed everything that was possible, and Chen Feng was only able to beg not to touch everything in a row. Yuan Yuan realized that Chen Feng could not let her stop. At the same time, he turned to his boss in a sniper and asked if he had 2 more people near the goal. God said not to shoot first. Yuan Yuan pouted and thought that it was worth pretending that she gives her tea and take the opportunity to calm her down, and saw that she was impending her mistress. Yuan Yuan held out a glass of girl with water and said to drink tea and refresh. However, Feng Xiaomin did not pay attention to Yuan Yuan and pressed again to the main character. At the same time, Yuan Yuan was only able to overturn the cup of water. Feng Xiaomin pressed against the body of the protagonist and said that she was very convenient in her hands while the guy tried to stop her. Chen Feng tried to explain to her that the girls could not be so close with men because they could be abducted by terrible uncles. Sniper looked at the friendly company of the protagonist. He looked in the girl's face and realized that it was really her. The boss understood that things were bad and his face was covered later. The man did not understand why she was here. Suddenly, the sniper noticed something unusual. The police stopped near karaoke. They understood that since Chen Feng is a key figure, then it was necessary to pick it up. The man looked down and told his boss about a friend and wondered if she was still working here. The man still did not get rid of the goal, while the boss said to act quickly and not harm people next to him. The sniper opened his eyes wide and focused, saying that there would be no problems and everything would be done. Yuan Yuan took the girl's hands and said that she was drunk and asked to allow her to take her to the restroom. However, the girl did not turn to the aid of her friend and told her to leave because she was not drunk. At the same moment, a shot sounded. Chen Feng opened his eyes wide. The bullet passed through the glass, and instantly the sofa overturned. 2 girls did not expect this and ended up right above the main character. The girls looked at their clothes and realized that she was stained with blood. The frightened Yuan Yuan looked at the protagonist and asked what was happening to him. The boss laughed. After all, he understood that this was a brilliant work. However, the one that he did not expect, so that the blood did not go from the wound but from the nose, the main character who could only smile. Both the boss and the sniper instantly realized that the goal was not achieved. Immediately after this, the boss was angry. He gave a slap in his subordinate and said that this was not a hemp, which made him rush so much. A man could only argue that they suddenly fell when the boss said, as soon as possible to get rid of him. At the same time, Main Fan looked up and noticed something strange. She instantly heard the sound of a shot. A girl's colleague asked her what happened, and she wondered if it was really the sound of a shot. Without explaining anything, Main Fan instantly went into the building, regardless of incomprehensible colleagues. Yuan Yuan pushed on Feng Xiaomin and told her not to behave thus, while Feng Xiaomin told me to look the truth, because the guy is not such a person. After that, she bent to the chest of the protagonist and said that, since they can do something with him here. The guy was only perplexed and asked what she was talking about. Hugging with the main character, the girl tried to kiss him while the guy only told her not to behave like little. Hugging with the guy, Feng Xiaomin asked if they were sleeping together that night. Yuan Yuan could only clench her teeth. However, suddenly the girl's hand touched the guy's wrist. Thinking that Feng Xiaomin was about to undress him, Yuan Yuan, with tears in her eyes, left the room while the guy shouted something wrong she was thinking. At the same time, Sniper watched this and was angry because Chen Feng continued to play the dead. The man said that there is still a chance and they should turn on the music because they should not notice the bullet. The man said that as soon as he got up, it was necessary to hold his head on the sight and not to screw up again. The sniper was clearly worried but watched him. However, unexpectedly, the eyes of the protagonist were activated and he noticed something. The guy did not understand why his eyes were suddenly activated. Chen Feng turned his head and noticed a hole from the shot. The guy realized that this was a 12mm bullet of a rifle, which was specially designed for warheads and was released about a minute ago. The guy instantly realized that there was an attack. He grabbed Yuan Yuan by the neck, and she asked him what he was doing and whether it was too much, while Chen Feng grabbed the girls why the guy grabbed them. Chen Feng bent down and said that he would absolutely explain everything later and said that there was a hole in the window. Immediately after this, a shot occurred. The bullet went straight to the main character with incredible speed. At the same time, Main Fan stood at the concierge and showed a photo of the protagonist. She asked instantly to say and in which room he was located. The administrator said that he was in the 502nd room. The girl waited for the elevator and left it. She shouted loudly his name, trying not to be late. The bullet once again pierced the glass and headed for the guy. Chen Feng grabbed the girl and tried to secure her as much as possible from the shot. After that, a volley began, and the arrivals could only take away their legs. Another shot from a rifle occurred. His strength was even enough to knock out part of the wall. Main Fan only closed her ears with her hands and tried to protect herself as much as possible from fragments and shots. Despite the fact that silence reigned very soon, but the light was still visible. The sniper was then covered. After all, he understood that this was impossible and he could not find their position so quickly because even professional soldiers could not understand where they were sitting in such a short time. After silence, she watched this situation, and his face was also covered then. After all, he did not understand how he did it because Chen Feng was just an ordinary person. The man understood that he could not be released from this room. Very soon, the shots were over. Yuan Yuan and Feng Xiaomin sat with each other so frightened sheep. They were both at different corners, but they were still silent. Chen Feng looked at the officers and realized that most likely she was very angry. The girl grabbed the protagonist by the gateway and asked him really immortal and how he could play with international killers. Main fan slowly moved to the window frame and tried to find out the position, otherwise other people would be in danger. Chen Feng grabbed the girl by the shoulders and said that a sniper on the roof of the opposite building. Main fan did not understand who Chen Feng was, and could he just pass the occupation in order to see a sniper, or is it just a coincidence? The girl took the walkie-talkie and asked that for help. Soon, many police cars headed for karaoke. After a moment, they surrounded the building. 1-1. They went into the building and said that the capture detachment was ready. Main fan grabbed the guy by the collar and asked how he copes with this. Horror knows that he would not have a good day. The girl sincerely does not understand why he still will not tell her the truth. However, the guy understood that he could not just tell about what happened these days, because all this could take for the nonsense of a madman. To describe, she said not to worry, this whole guy will definitely not be able to escape, and even a fly would not fly past them. The girl said that they should not underestimate the enemy, because there could be two of them, and asked to be alert while talking in the walkie-talkie. Chen Feng at that time plunged into deep thoughts. The guy understood that because of this hype, they could not just pass by him, because it all began in all-by-chance meetings in Lapshikova a month ago. Main fan asked a question, is it really a random meeting? Hearing this conversation, Feng Xiaomin was also strained. Chen Feng said it was because of food and good old man. Anya said that he simply gave him a strange bracelet. Main fan did not understand what Chen Feng was trying to say. The guy said that this is the very strange bracelet that she spoke of, and with respect to who the old man is, really not knowing anything about these killers too, that he is pushing him. At the same time, the gang plunged into her thoughts because she did not understand why the old man gave the bracelet to him, because he was an ordinary person. And squinting Main fan asked him whether the bracelet. Chen Feng said he really has him. After that, he showed his tattoo, and the officers were surprised. She showed the gunpoint for the protagonist and asked, really he wants to deceive her. However, the guy got angry and said that he did not deceive her, and as soon as this bracelet was his then, he immediately merged with his body and became a pattern on the wrist. Feng Xiaomin opened her eyes widely, because no one could ever merge with this bracelet so quickly, not to mention an ordinary person. Main fan still did not believe the main character, and said that she could not believe, therefore, there is no need to come up with something in order to deceive her. However, Chen Feng claimed that he was telling the truth. Very soon, a loud sound sounded, and the door in karaoke was knocked out. The special forces went to the roof. One of them reported that all the teams reached its destination. Having released the drone, the man said that the target was confirmed on the roof to the south, and the operation began. As soon as the police entered the roof of the neighboring building, they immediately took measures. However, all this was useless since the sniper was cold and there was only a broom with weapons. At this moment, the man ordered to raise his hands. Turning up the broom, the special forces noticed something really unusual. The sniper was dead. As it turned out, in the body of a man, even despite his body armor, a huge hole gaped. All the special forces instantly strained because they never saw something like that. Main fan contacted the radio with the special forces and asked what happened when asking the question whether they caught the killer. From the radio, only an uncertain request was heard to check for ourselves. At the same time, the police station was perplexed even more. A certain man, apparently, the head of the department, shouted and asked what Main fan was doing. The man said that in case of loss of relic was so loud that now everyone was alarmed, and even an international killer, and something clearly went wrong. A huge folder with a photograph of the protagonist was thrown on the table. The girl looked at the face of the protagonist and could not but plunge into her thoughts. She asked what exactly was wrong with him. She said that, according to available information, he is just an ordinary person. Main Fan understood that despite the fact that Chen Feng admitted that he was associated with an artifact, but he had no real evidence, and if this is said now, the director would swear. The man did not calm down and asked why the international killer wanted to kill him. The girl's colleague said not to sulk the girl because they already have clues. The man asked if he knew that they have an international killer and said that this is a huge breakthrough to promote the case. The colleague was about to turn to the girl as she was about to do something. She saluted and asked her boss to give her a little time to find the killer. The girl's colleague went to his boss and handed him a cup of tea. He told him to watch the actions of the young, while the boss softened and said that he would expect good news from them. However, the unexpected Main Fan burst into the captain's room and said that they had bad news. At that moment, the head of the police asked what happened. Very soon, the company approached the guardian room. The body of the killer was literally melted. He froze in a state of agony. He was clearly dead, and the camera was filled with strange air. No one clearly expected such a development because in this way all the tips were erased. The mysterious church was held an unknown meeting. A certain man asked for an apology for the fact that the subordinate could not cope with the task. Gu Luxi, even despite him, said to forget about it because this is a yellow-haired girl, quite cunning. The man said that he thought that Chen Feng was an ordinary person and planned to just kill him and did not expect that she would appear here. Giyu Luxi asked if everything was ready for the final. The man said that everything was ready, and ordinary people will not even be able to find out anything. While the man was asking what to do next, Gu Luxi only smiled. The man said that this is really troublesome not only to pick up religion, but also not to damage his head. The mysterious energy has spread throughout the cathedral. A panic spread throughout the building. Some terrorists begged their boss to help. The man clearly did not expect this expense of events. Gu Luxi only silently watched this situation but was clearly dissatisfied. People did not believe what they saw. Many corpses headed to the moon and began to levite. The man did not understand his soldiers. At the same time, in the air, long, rotten bodies began to move strangely. One of them, even despite all the stench around him, was able to resist his feet. The zombie seemed to be witted to attack nearby people. Of course, people were unusual and armed from head to toe, but absolutely everyone did not expect such an outcome of events. The same man asked what kind of monsters these are, because they smell of dead. However, unexpectedly he noticed how the thread dug into his skin. As it turned out, above him was a mysterious girl who controlled the threads and seemed to fly. Being in the air, a girl with red eyes only laughed. The man immediately realized that the same person was a bloodthirsty Georgie. Gu Luxi could only look at the girl with an evil smile. The bloodthirsty Georgie looked at her victims and laughed. The girl told them not to run and play with her dolls. After that, many zombies headed towards their opponents as if under control. One of the terrorists could not believe that they would need to fight her. He lowered the whole clip in just a few seconds and shouted loudly. The man understood that this was far from the only such case, and all his colleagues acted exactly the same. However, the unexpected body of a man began to lavage and rose into the air. That even more terrible is that weapons were grabbed with them. The bloodthirsty Georgie looked only at this from the side. She said that playing with such a weapon is bad. The girl said that only a bad child does this. The bloodthirsty Georgie licked her lips and said that he would be punished. After that, the thread literally raised a man. He tried to resist, but all this was in vain. Despite his last screams, literally cut a lot of limbs and naturally deprived the man's life. The boss said not to move and remove the pistols. Only after that the bloodthirsty Georgie stopped. She laughed and asked, "Did they really finish playing so quickly?" Having descended down, the girl literally entered the puddles of blood. As if a little girl, she laughed and said that those toys that her dad brought her very cheerful. Immediately after that, she rushed in the arms to her father, which turned out to be Gulucsi. The girl jumped up to his employee and said that his sunglasses are very good, and he still had a lot left, so she wants to play with him. The man at this time only tried to stop the crazy girl. The man clenched his teeth and realized that he was diligently gathering masters and would surely overcome it. Guluz asked his daughter if she wants to stay at home or wants to go hunting. The girl joyfully said that she would be glad to go to her again. The man said that she could do this, but only with 3 additional conditions. The man extended a photograph of the protagonist and said that if she does not do it, then she again could never go hunting. At the same time, a beautiful atmosphere reigned in an antique shop. Yuan looked at all types of antiques and only thought that she misunderstood everything. Chen Feng, who watched the girl, understood that Feng Xiaomin was drunk and carried complete nonsense in the club, after which Yuan did not talk to him. The guy understood that he should find at least some way to explain to her that there was nothing between her and Feng Xiaomin. Suddenly, for herself, the girl noticed that ink was on her dress. Yuan decided to change her clothes. On the way to the locker room, Chen Feng stopped the girl and tried to say hello to her. The girl literally jumped from the protagonist because she was unpleasant to see him right here and now. "I'm trying to ignore him," the girl grunted and still passed the guy. Chen Feng could only look at what was happening in a stupor. The guy smiled because he understood that she should still be angry. At the same time, beautiful weather reigned on the street. Feng Xiaomin is not a glory in the hands of a wrapped piece of gift. The girl smiled and said that the cake was ready. She said that she needed to persuade him and listen to him. The unexpected girl went to the main character, and the guy turned back. Chen Feng began to poke on the girl and asked why she was again in his shirt. However, ignoring the protagonist, she handed him a bundle of food and said that she had prepared a cake for him. The guy was clearly glad and scratched his head with happiness. The guy said that she did not need to try so much. However, the girl came close to the main character and said that it was not difficult because she is still his bride. However, the guy was clearly dissatisfied with this and said not to say because if Yuan hears, then there would be even more misunderstandings. From such cruel words, Feng Xiaomin burst into tears and asked what she was doing wrong. The guy quickly caught himself and said that she was a good girl and invited her to eat a cake. The girl handed a gift to the main character and said that she had made this cake for him. Suddenly, the guy activated his divine eye and realized that he perceives this cake as a love because it contains unidentified special substance. The guy understood that she clearly added something incomprehensible and dangerous to the cake. However, Chen Feng breathed out and said that he would forget about it so that she would not be sad. Chen Feng laughed and said that he needs to do something and he would join a little later. The girl tried to stop him, but was too angry. She wondered if he had seen everything and knows what materials in the cake. However, she did not abandon her beliefs and realized that she could not spend such precious material wasted. The girl instantly grabbed the guy by the hand. Suddenly, for the protagonist, the girl pressed her whole body to him. She handed him a cake and said that she tried to make this cake for him because it was very difficult. Immediately after this, even more blood flowed from the nose of the protagonist. The guy smiled and asked the girl not to do this. Chen Feng understood that she could resort to the fetish of medicine and Bai Shun love cake. The guy understood that he could never eat him. However, the girl seemed to have not heard the pleas of the protagonist and pressed him with her whole body trying to foil his cake. The girl smiled and approached the guy. She was glad that she had almost succeeded. Chen Feng turned into his head and screamed in despair that she would not do it. Of course, she stumbled upon herself on the door, which he easily discovered. Immediately after that, both fell into the doorway. Chen Feng cursed loudly while the girl fell right on him. Chen Feng said that it was very painful and reminded how he said not to create a problem. The girl was perplexed but she was glad that her cake was in order. However, what they did not calculate is the fact that the guys are driving into the room, Yuan, who, with embarrassment, did not know where to sit because she changed her clothes. The guys sharply noticed that they had come at a clearly inappropriate moment. While the girl was numb, looking at Chen Feng, who had come loudly and did not understand what to do. Life from his face literally went away at one point. At the same time, Feng Xiaomin wiped her clothes and said that he had killed hope for all people. Despite the protests of the protagonist, Yuan asked, "The guy really attacked the girl?" Chen Feng pulled his hand trying to explain the misunderstanding, but he did not take into account something. They still did not allow the girl to calmly change clothes, and she stammering stepped aside. From despair, she hit her hand over the main character, giving him a slap in the face. Makini went to Feng Xiaomin and asked if everything was in order with her. The girl said that everything was in order, simply Chen Feng could not stand it, and almost ruined the cake. Yuan stressed sharply when she saw this piece of the cake, because she realized that the girl wanted to use this cake in order to seduce the main character. Feng Xiaomin interpreted Yuan's gaze differently. She considered that her rival realized that she could not eat this cake. Yuan began to extend his hands in the cake and say that since Feng Xiaomin prepared it herself, he should be tasty, while Feng Xiaomin said that she did not need to try him, not an experimental rat, in order to do it. Suddenly, someone knocked on the house of the protagonist. On the threshold stood a man fan of pathos clothes. Nevertheless, Chen Feng could not even recognize her. Chen Feng turned to the girl and asked what she was doing. Main fan said that the guy was blessed and held out a piece of paper. He said that this is due to the case of the theft of cultural relics, and this is due to him even if he was pursued by a mysterious group. The girl said that this aforementioned case made her stay next to him 24/7, and Feng Xiaomin and Yuan were immediately surprised because this was surveillance throughout the day. Immediately after this, main fan handed the paper to the main character, who was taken aback by the content. The girl rushed in her opinion on the protagonist. She said that for the sake of his protection, she and Chen Feng will now live under the same roof in the store. After that, main fan asked her colleague to pull her a tablet that she was immediately indicated. The girl held out the plan of the house and said to stay in the room on a single agreement. Officially, she said that Chen Feng will now live in a large room, and she would turn another room into a room for observation for light protection. At the same time, Yuan and Feng Xiaomin go to the utility room. Chen Feng was very surprised that his room is now in the former Yuan room. The guy could not imagine how he would be riding on the bed of Yuan. Literally, such thoughts of his mind was clouded. The guy had already begun to imagine how Yuan touch him imitating the Buddha. He introduced her gaze, who looks at the guy like water. From such fantasies, blood instantly flowed from his nose. However, in the middle of these thoughts, the guy received a blow to the head. Main fan asked the protagonist what he fantasizes there. Yuan laughed awkwardly and said that while Chen Feng is safe, it does not matter how long he will live in the utility room. So, immediately after this, the protagonist's hand was seized by Feng Xiaomin, who said that it was not at all and she wants to sleep with the main character. Hearing such a request by Yuan angry, main fan squinted and drew her attention to something strange. Feng Xiaomin pressed to the breast of the protagonist and said that she would protect him. The girl literally choked the guy who begged to leave him alone, driving the circles around Yuan, but Chen Feng cried and said that Yuan would still be incorrectly understanding, while the girl did not get off and said that men and women should sleep together. Watching this picture, Meng Fan only squinted. Chen Feng finally unhooked a girl who clearly did not expect this. At the same time, Main Fan remembered someone because she had an too unusual relationship with the main character. Main Fan wondered what relationship they had because, according to her, she appeared in the circle of communication between the protagonist recently. Nevertheless, She could not get rid of the feeling that something was wrong because the information showed that the girl was a mulatto and her father is a very rich banker. I realized that in order for such a rich girl to come here, a loan should happen, that it is really serious. However, during the heavy thoughts of the officer Feng Xiaomin, he only clung to the main character. Main Fan squinted and was still in her thoughts. The reddened Yuan said that she was too dangerous for the protagonist. Ultimately, all this dispute grew into a tug of war. Observing this situation, officially only remembered the official designations of a close distance. She understood that these both girls violate the intimate distance of the protagonist. The girl squinted and realized that it is very noticeable that both of them really like Chen Feng. Looking at the faces of satisfied girls, realized that Chen Feng was really beautiful. Looking at the guy's face, she realized that the only thing that attracts in him so his beauty. Catching herself on such thoughts, Main Fan also blushed. Her heart began to beat like a crazy one, and she climbed the question of what she thinks about. The girl waited enough time that they could not sleep with the main character for his own safety. Turning away from all this fun company, Main Fan said that they need to go into the monitoring room. Feng Xiaomian came close to the main character and said to eat a cake as soon as possible. That unfortunate cake was again in front of the main character, and the guy realized that she had not forgotten about him. Once again, Chen Feng said that he remembered that he had to get the goods now. Chen Feng was looking for support from Yuan and asked if it was true. The girl said that this is true, but in any case, the police would not be able to intervene in their affairs. After that, the girl said to go with what the guy joyfully agreed. Feng Xiaomin did not expect such cooperation and begged not to leave. The girl literally burst into tears because she realized that the mission had failed. Chen Feng again ended up in the antique market. The guy defended himself from the sun and said that after their long walk, they did not find anything good, and his eyes were terribly tired. Yuan offered to divide all, then it will be easier to look. Chen Feng was very surprised because she realized that she behaved so awkwardly all the way to find a reason to leave. Remembering the recent events of Chen Feng, realized that most likely Yuan hates him. Moving away from the girl, the guy plunged into his thoughts while Yuan looked at him from the side. The girl accidentally slipped off the stairs and began to fall down. Chen Feng, who was still not far, shouted to the girl to be careful. However, these words no longer helped a falling person. Chen Feng instantly ended up near the girl and grabbed her. The guy exhaled because he caught her happiness. The girl with a reddened face looked at the protagonist. As it turned out, Chen Feng caught the girl in the most decent way. Then he noticed what indecency he made. Chen Feng instantly moved away from the girl and said not to understand him, vice versa. He did not do it on purpose. Hearing the justification of the protagonist, Yuan only smiled and thanked the protagonist. The guy opened his eyes widely because the girl would not be offended. Yuan said that she knew that the girl flirts with him. At the same time, in the inner world of the protagonist, the guy literally shone with happiness because he believed that his goddess is such an angel that is accepting. Chen Feng smiled and realized that they not only allowed a misunderstanding, but also switched to a new level. The girl took the hand of the protagonist and said to continue the search for antiques. Suddenly, Chen Feng heard an unknown noise and asked what was happening there. Our company decided to check what is happening. Once among the crowd, Chen Feng was very surprised at what he saw. Among the whole crowd, the protagonist was instantly lowered on his back. This very person was none other than Sun Jiangyi. Once on the floor, everyone was very surprised. His head was in a woman's chest and the guy literally could not breathe. A woman with a reddened face looked at the face of the protagonist and asked why you are here. However, Yuan was not going to endure another rival and told the main character to move away from her as quickly as possible. Very soon, a huge crowd crowded around the tree. A certain arrogant man threw a stack of papers towards a woman and told her to leave here. Chen Feng turned to Sun Jiani and asked what happened. Looking at a stack of papers, the woman said that after he left the company from time to time, she had to buy goods on her own. The woman said that even despite the search all morning, she still did not find something worthwhile, and it was incredibly tiring. The woman said that today the sun bakes very much, showing its forms. The woman offered the company to go under a banana tree. Under the tree was an unknown man who squatted. The woman looked and the bowl and realized that most likely it was a good product. Taking a closer look, Sunjini opened her eyes wide. The girl realized that this bowl was unique. She smiled and said that it seems invisible, but this is a very rare treasure. Sunjani said that her today's luck is still on her side. The woman went to the old man and reasoned that he most likely a regular poor man by the clothes and appearance of this man. The leader crouched and picked up the bowl. After that, she asked how much she costs. He said that she was from a mountain nest, and before he heard cultural people that I need to go to a big city to determine this antiques and asked if she could do it. I hope he really does not know her price. Sunjani smiled and realized that in accordance with the previous experience, if they sell something, then it should not be expensive. Sunjani smiled and asked from afar, Lee he arrived. The man agreed and said that he had come from the distant mountain. He also said that his son to marry, and they need money for the wedding ceremony. The old man said that he did not want to sell old things from the house despite everything. After all, these are things of his grandfather. The woman showed a sign and congratulated the old man because she would pay him 20,000 yuan if she sells this bowl and asked what she was thinking there on this subject. The old man smiled and was extremely glad to realize this price. Very soon, the woman was at the ATM again understood that since this grandfather from the mountain would be better if she gives money in cash. Very soon she was near the old man and told him to check the cash. However, the man said that there is no need to check a good person and would not deceive him. After that, the man handed his cup. The woman was extremely glad of this purchase. However, unexpectedly, literally from the old man's hands, a certain man took this bowl. Sunjani was very surprised at the newly arrived guest. The impudent man asked whether this product was genuine and said to name the price. Sunjani asked what the men do because, regardless of the rules, she had already bought this thing. The man smiled and said that buying and selling is just a transfer of money and change. After that, he asked if she took this thing. The man was surprised that the girl gave only 20,000 yuan for such a bowl. The man said to return the money to the girl and said that he would give 80,000. The man was extremely surprised at this deal. Sunjani did not understand what was happening if she had already bought this bowl. Immediately after this, the conflict flared up. The man said Sunjani not to do nonsense because he is kind. The man grabbed the old man by the shoulders and offered to immediately go to the bank. A perplexing old man looked at the girl in bewilderment. Having lost the last thread of patience, the girl said to return her a bowl and tried to grab her. However, the man smiled and said that he bought it, therefore it was his own. Immediately after that, he pushed Sunjani and sent her. Immediately after this, all those random events occurred. However, back to reality. Chen Feng looked at Sunjani and asked Li in order. The evil woman swore and said that she would not leave it so simply. Having passed forward, she pointed to the man and told them to stand. Realizing that the persistent woman had not yet left, that second man got angry. However, all this time the crowd was on the side of that very man because, according to his words, the girl tried to deceive the old man and get on him. Sunjani opened her eyes wide and said to prevent him from leaving the street. However, unexpectedly in their direction, the skin of a banana flew. The girl did not expect this, but this garbage came all right on her back. An angry eyewitness shouted to the girl from here. Sunjani asked what he was talking about, because it was obviously that the man violated the rules. However, the man said that people will know better people. The man said that this woman wanted to pay 20,000 yuan and fool the old man what was vile on her part. However, Sunjani defended her point of view because she did not understand what rude to be in order to take the already purchased goods. The man leaned over and said that since she was so beautiful, then why her soul is so black. The man said that he pays 70,000 when she paid only 20. An angry crowd sided with the man, read that it was also the arrogantly intimidating ordinary people, and began to drive Sunjani. The crowd decided to intervene in this conversation and throw the girl with all garbage, which was in their hands. Sunjani clearly did not expect such a turn of events. When Chen Feng finally came to his senses, he immediately rushed to defend the girl. Having passed forward, he closed all the garbage that flew to Sun Jiangyi with his body. The furious crowd began to throw, and the protagonist of which she considered the girl's accomplice. At that moment, Chen Feng was angry and squinted. Looking at the ongoing chaos, the man grabbed the old man by the shoulders of the old man and laughed. Chen Feng asked him really who wants to escape. Suddenly, for all, Chen Feng quickly rushed to the company and hit the same old man, literally knocking him his teeth. After such a strong blow, the old man lay on the floor unconscious. At this moment, the whole crowd instantly froze. In the same shock was Yuan, who did not understand what was happening. Sunjani, who at that time was sitting on the floor, was also very surprised because she did not want to. The same man was clearly not happy with what happened. Chen Feng squinted and said that they could not be fated. An angry crowd flared up with even greater force, because she understood that since Chen Feng could not buy from a man, they decided to just score the seller. Sun Jiani and Yuan clearly did not understand what was happening and asked the guy with their gaze. Sunjani instantly approached the guy and asked, "Really? He hit the wrong thing," because everyone was sure that he was supposed to hit the fat. However, Chen Feng said to be sure that he was not mistaken. Suddenly, on the shoulder of the protagonist was someone's hand. As it turned out, the conflict decided to intervene, Meng Fan, who asked what he was doing. Sunjani went to the old man and asked if he was in order. The guy asked, did Main Fan follow them? The woman said that the guy attacked an elderly man, and he had huge problems. The same man who bought a bowl asked the whole elevator saw what was happening because the deceivers were distraught and began to rush at people. The crowd looked at the officer hopefully and said to send him to the bars. Main Fan also fiercely looked at the protagonist, grabbing him by the collar. She did not expect Chen Feng would be like that. The guy lowered his head and could not say a word. Sunjani was very surprised and said that Chen Feng is uncontrollable. Main Fan shouted that everyone would pass with her. Yuan, who did not at all participated in the conflict, was surprised that she was interfering in this situation. Sunjani could only breathe out of despair because she did not want this conversation to end in this way. Father said there was no innovation because she knows that she can terribly wrong and will definitely return to them later. Meanwhile, Chen Feng smiled and asked, anyone is not interested in why he hit the old man. Chen Feng said to look at the bills that lay on the floor. Chen Feng smiled and said to look at the bill at their feet. Many looked at these bills, but they saw anything remarkable. Yuan was very surprised and looked at a stack of papers. Sunjani also opened her eyes wide and asked what the problem was. The girl looked in the direction of pieces of paper and was surprised. After looking at the bills, the girl noticed that they were false. Sunjani instantly got up from her seat and wondered how they could be false. The crowd began to doubt it because I could not understand how this happened. Nevertheless, Sunjani said that this was impossible, but she took money from an ATM. She tried to assure the crowd that she could not replace them, while Chen Feng only looked at the man. The guy understood the evil plan of the two conspirators. Even looking at the old man, the protagonist had not a drop of sympathy in his gaze. Main Fan realized that the money was fake. She closed her eyes and realized that according to San Jenny, he belongs to the largest company to acquire antiques in the city, and she was the manager of the procurement department. The girl understood that the dark horse of the company could not throw up the false 20,000 yuan. After that, The officer looked at the protagonist who smiled all this time. The girl realized that Chen Feng looks too confident. The officers asked the question, "Are things really so that the old man is not an innocent sheep?" Main Fan went to the old man and could not believe what she was thinking about it. It seemed to the girl that at first glance he really looked like a man from the mountains, and wondered if he was somehow involved in this. The officers wondered, but doubted that this fat man was not connected with him. Main Fan did not understand why Chen Feng is so decisive. The man who was involved in the incident asked for his hands to the crowd trying to find comfort there. The man screamed after all, an unscrupulous deceiver threw the old man with money. The crowd joyfully led to this trick and was already preparing another portion of garbage. Hearing this news, Sunjiani turned very pale. One of the crowd swung at the woman and tried to persuade the other people to ask her the heat. However, unexpectedly the hand of that very man stopped. As it turned out, Chen Feng turned out to be this man, and the unknown immediately screamed in pain, and tomato fell out of his hands. Chen Feng smiled and said that everything needs to be checked, so you need to slow down. After that, the guy squinted and looked in a certain direction. There were many suspicious personalities who were so convenient among the crowd. Chen Feng said that he needed to hit him in order to make it reaching them. At this moment, the crowd did not understand what was happening. Main Fan tried to restore the protagonist and asked, "Really, he wants to fall behind bars?" However, Chen Feng only smiled arbitrarily. The guy held out his hand forward and pointed to a certain man. Immediately after that, he directed his finger to the other. Ultimately, he pointed to the third person. After some time, Chen Feng pointed to the very man who tied the conflict. Chen Feng smiled and said that they all come from one gang. The crowd was surprised because the situation took a completely different turn. The man understood that things were bad and clenched his teeth. Sunjani was very surprised from such news and asked for what Chen Feng was talking about. Main Fan also drew attention to these people and was very surprised. The girl lowered her head and plunged into thought. The officers noticed that they were really more energetic than the rest, and it was they who excited the crowd that was too suspicious. Nevertheless, this was completely non-evidence for this, and she still wondered why the guy was so confident, and was he really able to understand this for such a short period of time. Chen Feng spread his hands and said that a man should stop making himself a big bump. The guy smiled and said that the real boss was already icing. The same old man finally got up and asked who hit him and what happened. An innocent look of the old man woke up after this blow and asked who hit him. The man who, according to the main character, was his colleague, said that this is the same guy who beats everyone in a row, and said that he would go to the police and write a complaint. The old man was perplexed and said that he did nothing to the guy. The crowd did not understand what was happening, but it intrigued it to reveal mystery. Chen Feng smiled and said, "Really? They are still playing." Chen Feng smiled angrily and said that their scam was brilliant until today because he met the protagonist. Immediately after that, the guy was behind the man's back. Main Fan asked the guy what he was trying to do, while Chen Feng grabbed the very bowl with a sharp movement of his hand. Chen Feng said this is a bowl with a peony pattern since the Ming dynasty and is genuine. Sunjani said this is really a real treasure, and she has been working in this industry for many years. Main Fan wondered what artifacts was bought by Chen Feng. The guy asked whether they use this genuine bowl to heal the buyer who decided to buy antiques. Then, in the head of Main Fan, a picture was formed. First, their boss, hiding behind the illiterate peasant from the mountains, sells antiques, attracts antiques collectors, and after conversation and a low price, he collected that he did not have a mobile phone in order to get cash. Zherdiai distracted attention while the old man changed the money. While the man distracted her, old man easily replaced real money with false ones. And after the Gerdai takes away the antiques, the old man threw money in Janie and set up the crowd against her. I understand that Chen Feng opened their entire plan. A man got angry. Chen Feng said their acting was magnificent and also concerns the antiques because the whole chip in the absence of attention in performing ordinary actions and shifts of the focus. The guy understood that everything was happening too quickly, and the private traders of the conflict did not have time to understand that the money was replaced. Soon Johnny wondered how such people could exist, because if not for Chen Feng this time, she really had suffered. Chen Feng smiled and said that there could be aware that good luck on her side. The officer understood that the antiques is real, and the goal is that in the hands of the buyer, there will be tens of thousands of yuan, and checking it many times, they get a rather good profit, and this plan is really good if it is true. Main Fan understood that even elite police officers could hardly see the catch, and it is simply impossible for the guy to find this. And in the end, the protagonist still has no evidence that the old man is a gang boss. The man said that he was not caught, not a thief, and the protagonist has no evidence. He said that this is unfair to him as an old man. Chen Feng handed over to the Main Fan bowl and said that this will be one of the evidence in fraud. The guy asked, "Really?" She still does not believe him because all the evidence of the old man, as soon as she searches him. Main Fan squinted and asked, "Really? He invented all this? Because no one has the right to search people." However, Chen Feng said that this is not so bad, guys, like the most important hero should do this. Immediately after this, Chen Feng grabbed the old man by the clothes while he was thinking that Chen Feng was going to hit him again and began to ask for help. However, immediately after this, Chen Feng literally with one hand raised the old man into the air that even the crowd herself was surprised. Chen Feng said he did not want to get a deadline for an illegal search and invited the old man to dance hip-hop because it would not violate anything. Main Fan asked the protagonist about to do something. With then on his face, the old man asked the protagonist to let him go. Chen Feng asked the music and began to wave the old man as if a pillow, and everyone looked at him in bewilderment. While the main character was trying to stop the man, fan from the pockets of the man unexpectedly began to fall out the piles of bills. The crowd realized that this money was the real 20,000 yuan, and the old man is really the culprit of this. The old man's colleague asked that you were strange there because he had just given the old man money, and this is his deposit. The guy smiled and said that if they have an excuse, then it would be even more interesting to be more interesting because everyone is optimistic. Well, the hero did not stop making the air end with the old man. At some point, the keys to the car fell out of the old man's pockets. The crowd also noticed this unusual find, which was sharply on the floor. Absolutely all the girls were surprised, therefore. Sunjani immediately noticed the icon on the key and realized that this was the key to the luxurious Maserati car. Chen Feng still did not let go of the old man who was barely, and said that people from the mountains were very rich. Main Fan thought deeply and looked down. Chen Feng said that everything is perfect, and he had already obtained all the necessary evidence. Main Fan picked up the keys and activated them. After a kind of sound, a car sounded, which indicated that the doors were open. The crowd was immediately surprised because she thought about who could be the owner of this luxurious car behind a tree. Sunjani straightened her glasses and said that even she could not afford such a car. The crowd understood that this car costs at least 20 million, and there could be such that one who is not able to pay for the wedding of his son can travel in such a car. Chen Feng smiled and said that now they simply would not need to deny it all, and just open the door and show their rights and a bunch of fake money in order to prove everything. The old man looked angrily at the protagonist and asked if they should not pretend to be a mountain man, so that they could believe this coincidence because everyone already realized that Chen Feng was right, and the old man himself turned out to be a liar. The man built a strange grimace and said that after this prelude, he finally breaks his mask and said to knock everything out of it. Immediately after that, a huge pile will fly to the old man. After they hit him on his forehead, a lot of baht scattered everywhere. The men's colleagues tried to support him, asking if everything was in order. As it turned out, Sunjiani herself threw this pack of bills, who called him an old fraudster who did this in order to harm good people. Unable to withstand such an insult, the old man told his people to break the girl. After that, the same subordinates took out cold weapons from their pockets and agreed by order. Very soon, these people surrounded the protagonist. They claimed that their motto is hit and run away. Chen Feng smiled and said that since they are attacking in the middle, otherwise these guys are very brave. However, the guy smiled and told anyone not to be afraid of, because of course Chen Feng will be the one who will win them. He heard such impudent speeches, the old man laughed and told the guy to die. Immediately after this, the crowd of thugs headed towards the protagonist. However, Main Fan did not care and escaped forward. The girl immediately made an uppercut to the nearest man. With sharp movements, she destroyed literally half of the gang in a moment. All her moves were verified and very correct. Chen Feng admired her coolness. Very soon, the girl laid her leg on her head, the old man who was lying on the floor. The girl picked up the handcuffs and said that they would all need to go through his sight in order to clarify everything. Yuan leaders were very surprised by the abilities of the protagonist, while he only laughed and said that his own sister from the police governed the law and justice. Very soon, many police cars arrived at the scene. There were strange conversations in the police station. Someone asked his colleague, really he did not say that he was familiar with the beautiful police. At the same time, Chen Feng, together with the leader and Yuan, were behind bars. Sunjiani was indignant and did not understand on what basis they were all closed. Yuan said that if it were not for Sunjiani, then Chen Feng and Yuan would not be herein, while the woman was offended by these words. At the same time, the guy squeezed his fist and wondered if all this happened because of the bracelet he received from the old man. He went into the camera of the protagonist and said that all those who are there could leave. Yuan was extremely delighted with this news, and Sunjiani said that they were decisively acting as decent citizens. Chen Feng breathed out and realized that since they were letting them go well, Yuan said that it was necessary to make a mask with grapefruit leaves, while Sunjiani told the main character to go out. However, unexpectedly, right in front of the very release of the protagonist was not missed and said that he could not leave. The girls were immediately surprised because they did not understand why this guy deserved it. Chen Feng was angry and said that they detained him illegally. The man said that recently he has been very concerned about theft of national treasures, and the province has recently sent the deputy director to personally lead, and they cannot create problems for him. His colleagues said that the chef was sure that everything was under control. The girls' officers held flowers in their hands and whispered on the topic of the personality of the deputy director. The man asked what the girl and his colleagues said, that she knew that the deputy director would force the protagonist. The man said that he was very unorganized and undisciplined, therefore he should be punished. Very soon the luxurious car was within the gaze of a man. The police immediately surrendered to their boss. They all stood in a line as one and gave honor to the deputy. Very soon the door of the car opened. At that moment, a mysterious man came out from there. His clothes were extremely unusual for this region, and he had painted blue. The man combed his hair and said that he regrets that he had not so grandiose. When other officers looked at the man, they had no idea what was happening. The head of this department in the police shouted loudly and asked who it was. The man was not even given the floor to say, but he could only smile. A colleague of the boss grabbed the guy by the collar and said instantly to free the road for their boss, whom they wanted to meet. Smiling intensely and realizing that the joke went too far, the guy said that he was the same deputy director who was appointed to a special mission. The same man who grabbed him by the collar immediately tensed as the head of the police. After that, the man even without trembling a certificate without an eye. It turned out that he was really their boss. From such a surprise, even the hat of that very impudent colleague fell. The man held out his hand to the deputy and greeted him, for which that man thanked him. The head of the department laughed and said that it was very cool that the youth is so confident in their abilities, while the captain literally lay on the ground from the impossibility of doing anything, and the rest sympathized with the poor man because he attacked the authorities. The deputy looked at the head of the department and said that the director was supposed to be notified by phone, and asked if they had done what the head of the department did, said that everything was ready according to his instructions. In general, she said that after all, this person has something to do with this matter, but on the basis of their current evidence, this cannot be justified. However, the deputy bent down to the man and said that this was confidential information. Very soon, the same man who was literally humiliated and near the threshold came to the room of the protagonist. He asked the protagonist his name. The man understood that he had just attacked the authorities, but this trip to the United States should go well. With irritation on his face, the man asked the protagonist with whom he was the second day of this month at about 3 days. Chen Feng thought and asked if they didn't write down his recognition, because he, along with his friends, was in karaoke and they were almost killed. An angry man again slapped the table and asked why they wanted to kill him, to what the guy said that he himself did not know that. After that, he showed a photograph of the bracelet and asked where he had ever seen this thing. The guy was surprised because they did not expect that they still had problems with this bracelet, and the sister and sister from the police asked the same. The guy understood that he then showed her that the bracelet became a tattoo on his body, but she did not believe him. The girl said that the international terrorist, who is suspected of planning a large looting of burials in the country where archaeological excavations are suspected. She said that recently 2 strange ones also occurred in the case of those related to this. If the guy has any relation to these situations, then he shines a prison. After that, she began to interrogate these protagonists. The main character returned and wondered what this is connected, because he completely did not understand what exactly was happening. The boss bent to the main character and asked how long he would pretend to be an idiot, because he knows that the murder is a criminal offense. However, immediately after this, Meng Fan burst into the interrogation chamber. She went into this room and said that the captain was trying to pull out her recognition in Russia, and said that she could not stop the captain's behavior. The man asked, "Really? The woman suspects him of murder, because then he will be punished." Main Fan said that it was he who will be the one who will be punished because he had just disclosed confidential information about the witness. After that, she asked us to think, and whether he understands at least how serious this situation is. Hearing such remarks, the man instantly calmed down and said that in any case, as he said, if they did not cooperate with the police, then they will be severely punished. Chen Feng squinted and said that he was really ready to help, but he knew absolutely nothing about what the girl was talking about. The captain moved to the girl and told her to stop, because the boss from the next room was watching them. The deputy understood that throughout the process the reaction was normal, and only when it came to the bracelet with a cult with sculptural relics, the right hand of the main character twitched a little. The man understood that according to this information, he could have a tattoo on his wrist similar to a bracelet, and perhaps this is a key to business. Main Fan understood that the interrogation of the team was really terrible, even despite the fact that Chen Feng played a key role in this story. This prompted only to a more dangerous situation, but already for him. She understood that she could not just sit back and ignore it. Main Fan said, according to Chen Feng's information, only the object of protection and monitoring, and there is no evidence for its detention. The deputy head of the department only considered that, as soon as he finishes the interrogation, she releases him, and the situation is so incredible that the head of government will certainly notice his abilities. The man nodded his head and thanked the protagonist for his cooperation. Chen Feng scratched his head and asked if it was too unexpected. After that, the colleague said that the officers were left, and the man said that she was sure because Chen Feng was still in danger, and he would send someone to the guy. They were taken home. Very soon, the main character was in a police car. The guy looked down and wondered what happened. Chen Feng realized that the captain deliberately reveals all the secrets of the case to him, and if you look at his actions, then everything seems that this is precisely because of the bracelet that the old man gave him. Chen Feng recalled that when Man Fan, the guy, noticed how he whispered something to her, looking at the protagonist at the interrogation room, it was not difficult for a guy to notice that they all intentionally allow him to know that he was the goal of some international killer clan. As soon as the guy realized that nevertheless, literally, his whole life was resulting from his body, and he became like a dry piece of wood. Suddenly, the guy remembered that he also has a bracelet, and the police sooner or later find out that the bracelet became 1-1 with his body. The guy understood that he did not make sense to wait until the international killer kills him, and although it would be decided in a very strange way. After that, Chen Feng did not find anything better to curse the blue sky, and at the same moment a thunderstorm poured. The man soon ended up on his feet and understood that he was not yet the general director, so he could still climb to the top. At some point, Chen Feng recalled all these situations when he was left alone with the investigation. The man understood that since the sister of Xiao installed so many cameras in the store, he was still under strict assistance. The guy clenched his fist and realized that in addition, he was going to the kingdom of heaven and not to the island kingdom, and wondered how they would kill people. The same man who accompanied the protagonist wondered what was happening to the main character, because despite the fact that he is very quiet, but his eyebrows are very mobile. However, the man calmed down, interpreted himself somehow that his heart was shrouded in darkness. And this is due to the fact that the commander's words struck a deep blow to the very heart and began to sincerely worry about him. Suddenly, the guy heard something strange because he realized that he felt someone called him. In front of the hero was information about the capsule. The guy understood that he had mixed feelings right now, but he was still interested in the inner pocket of clothes. Suddenly, the guy realized that he had discovered a certificate of police officer levels. The guy understood that the person was standing behind the mirror, and in the interrogation room was his leader, and most likely the captain revealed his internal business, and more. The guy understood that one way or another they could kill him, and the captain revealed a rather serious secret. The guy squinted. After all, he understood that sooner or later they would catch him, but he has a bracelet and no one still knows that he still has the eyes of a jade tiger, and the guy wondered if he would give him to play this toy. Main Fan, who calmly looked at the protagonist, sharply realized that the atmosphere around him was unusual. However, the employee brought far from these things, because he understood that he was undercover for several years and no one could see his skills. The man understood that this game in the mouse cat became really more and more interesting. Very soon, Chen Feng again ended up on Antique Street. The man spent the protagonist, for which he thanked him. Very soon, the policeman went into his car again and said goodbye to the main character. Chen Feng scratched his head and thanked him because he brought him, and he was a little embarrassing that he would not get out of the car in order to accompany him. As it turns out, the same deputy who squinted and looked at the protagonist again. The man said that from this moment they would protect him personally, and this is spelled out in a certain piece of paper that he handed to the main character. Taking this piece of paper, the guy was upset because he understood that this was some kind of misunderstanding, because in this way they limited the freedom not only of himself, but also by Yuan Yuan and Feng Xiaomin. Chen Feng was upset and asked if Main Fan defended him, but that the guy said that their house was great, so he was sent here for the security of the guy. The guy scratched the back of the head, did not understand that in any case, the older sister bears the usual shape. But this guy is military uniform, and after all this happened, his guests will see what was happening lately and thinks that they were mistaken, that they would terribly affect profit. However, unexpectedly, the gas of the protagonist caught fire in red light, and he noticed something unusual. The guy looked at the backpack and realized that in it is a ballpoint pen with a needle with a poisoned cyanus kali, which would kill the enemy for 5 seconds. However, all this did not end there, and a miniature ion bomb which can easily destroy the villa. In the end, it all ended with an infrasound gun, thanks to which the enemy experiences hallucinations, loses its balance, and paralyzes it. However, even for the protagonist, the system could not find unknown fragments of an unknown purpose. The main character's hair seemed to become on end, and he widely opened his eyes from surprise. The guy grabbed his head, asked the question of what he was doing, because such a huge amount of weapons will not meet every time. The guy looked at the policeman and began to guess that this man deliberately pretends to be a police officer, but is actually a killer. A policeman with a serious expression on his face proposed his help in the unloading of things. However, the most strange gaze of the protagonist did not slip away from the policeman's eyes. The man understood that he began to look extremely strange when he saw something, looked at the case. He wondered if Chen Feng could see something, but quickly eliminated this thought. At the same time, Chen Feng asked the question of how the store door opens with bewilderment. The guy knocked on the front door and said that he had returned. Opening the door to the protagonist, 2 pairs of multicolored eyes looked. When the guy saw them, he was very surprised. However, immediately after that, the door to the villa was closed almost, without injuring the guy. Immediately after this blow, Chen Feng was on the floor. Realizing that he could not protect his defender by the policeman, was not seriously scared. The man instantly threw his case and directed the gun towards the door. Then he bent down in front of the main character and asked him in order whether he was in order. Bending to the door, the man slowly headed for its center. He wondered the killer was really behind the door. Very soon, the door to the villa opened. The policeman blushed and froze in a stupor. Yuan Yuan and Feng Xiaomin dressed in some strange masks and began to parody rituals, waving the leaves. However, unexpectedly, women realized that their goal was Chen Feng, who lay a little behind. The girls instantly took off their masks and took a serious look by approaching the guy. They worried about him. The police exhaled because he realized that it was not some crazy, and only that was a rally. The policeman said that there was nothing wrong with this, and Chen Feng would not die of this. Yuan Yuan said that they did not count on anything and just wanted him to be released and did not want to harm the main character. The policeman corrected his hat and wondered why the female logic is so strange. After that, Yuan Yuan began to approach the policeman and ask what happened to the main character. The man waved his hands trying to prevent approaching and said that he was not to blame for this. Feng Xiaomin at that time tried to make artificial respiration to the main character. Yuan Yuan, as soon as she noticed this, began to wave her arms and asked the girl what she was doing. At the same time, the policeman took out his notebook, did not understand that he needed to record this, because they provided first aid. Very soon, Chen Feng came to his senses and said that the girls may not worry, because they simply hit him with the door. The policeman said in the near future not to go anywhere, because in the hospital, in order to protect them. Because the time of the policeman began to inspect the entire room and wrote down something in his notebook. Yuan Yuan understood that she was annoying that she did not know that the policeman was writing down. Feng Xiaomin squinted and realized that she feels the same thing, despite the fact that he was a policeman to him, much more embarrassed. At the same time, Chen Feng sat on the couch and the girls approached him. Feng Xiaomin asked who it was at all. Putting a piece of ice to his nose, Chen Feng said that he had no choice but to agree to defense, because he did not accept the refusal. Feng Xiaomin squinted and said that it was obvious that the policeman came to follow them. The girl understood that this was another obstacle that again lowered the chances of detecting a relic. Chen Feng apologized to Yuan Yuan and said that it was all because of him, because he originally came to help her family get rich, but it was because of the guy now in the store is so restless. However, the girl interrupted him and said not to speak, because if it were not for him, then their family would live calmly, and hope appeared with his appearance, and so that the girl would not happen to help him. Chen Feng clenched his fist and began to admire Yuan Yuan, caught in determination. Suddenly, the girl remembered something and said that Chen Feng called Sun Jiani because she asked her to call back. However, then the guy already asked what about his mobile phone. He handed the guy to the policeman and said that he was disconnected when he was detained and he had to return him as soon as they got into the car, but he forgot about it. However, the guy looked closely and noticed something unusual about this phone. The policeman said not to worry, because there is no wiretapping on the phone and now he has a phone. The man said that if he really wants to realize the monitor, then he can simply tell the operator. Chen Feng quickly dialed Sunjiani number and asked with a reddened face. Li Sunjiani was looking for him. At the same time, the policeman and only looked at the guy with a cold look. 20 minutes later, a bright red car stopped near the mansion. Sunjiani put a heavy case on the table with a loud sound. Chen Feng looked at the suitcases, asked the leader what it is. The girl opened a suitcase and said that it was a case with dollars. Seeing such a huge number of bills, the guy was in earnest. Sunjiani said that this is all her property and giving money to him, the woman told him that she wants to join him. Chen Feng entered this self-confident woman and for some time could not answer it. Sunjiani smiled awkwardly and asked Li Chen Feng her. The guy scratched his head and asked whether the woman was joking, because despite the fact that the Gao family is happy, they own only a small antique store, he cannot be compared with a large company like the one that she worked. Nevertheless, the guy hit himself on his chest and said that if she has goods requiring evaluation, then he is in business. The woman lowered her head of despair. She closed her eyes and began to cry. The guy stood in a stupor because he did not understand what he had to do in this situation. I did not go to the woman and ask that it was with her. All those present were perplexed from such a development of events. Sunjiani, with a mild expression on her face, said that she was now homeless. Chen Feng asked how this could happen at all. Sunjiani said that this is all the fault of Liu Junlian, who takes revenge on her. She talked about how he secretly stole the antiques before leaving the office, and his bag was found at the auction, and the company decided that she was guilty of disappearing. The man deceived the company, therefore it was thrown out of it. Chen Feng was surprised because he could not imagine this. He asked if she called the police. After that, he remembered, and asked whether her uncle was president of Jinding and asked why he does not help her. Sunjiani said that it might seem that this problem can be quickly solved, but everything is not so simple. Sunjiani said that it is generally accepted that the Jinding is the main in the company of the Sun family, but in fact, 3 families are listed in the founders of the company, Jin, Sun, and Luo. The woman understood that it was very difficult for them not to kill each other. She remembered the atmosphere at the meeting of 3 families. The girl understood that the evidence was good, and the uncle was helpless. She understood that their goal was by no means simple, and certainly soon they would begin to act. Chen Feng became angry with all that the last time he was on fire. He tried to hide his crime and he knew that he should be calm, but he could not believe that he would be so vile. Sunjiani put her hand on her face and said that she was to blame and was unable to do something while he was preparing his loophole. Suddenly, the guy remembered something and asked a question whether he was involved in a case with a large bowl that he pulled out of the furnace. Chen Feng sharply recalled the very legendary bowl that brought him so much money and deserved to honor in the company. Feng Xiaomin asked what Chen Feng meant. The guy was embarrassed and said that this was a long story. Chen Feng understood that it was made by the old man for 2 million yuan, but his current market value is 20 million. Mom said that he was really offended by this in exchange for confidence and respect for Sunjiani. The guy did not expect that Liu Junlian would be cheaper. Feng Xiaomin squinted and realized that nevertheless, the instigator was an old man. Sunjiani smiled awkwardly and said that she was too careless, so she fell into their trap. The woman said that she did not know whether it was now in the hands of Gin's family. Chen Feng, together with the leader, looked silently at each other. The woman only cried and said that she worked a lot for him. He looked at the woman's tearful face and wondered what he was doing. Chen Feng laughed awkwardly and said that they would not tell about this broken bowl in order. The guy said that if she wants to cooperate with him, then in the beginning, she should ask the Gao family in order to join them. However, suddenly a loud voice sounded, which promised the woman to fulfill this. And Chen Feng and Yuan Yuan instantly taken aback. Feng Xiaomin hugged Sun Jiani and greeted the woman. Sun Jiani was clearly perplexed and asked what kind of appeal it was. The girl laughed and said that she was his bride. However, immediately after that a loud cotton was heard. Very soon the night came, only crows flew past the mansion. The main character's face was entirely and completely red from the blows with his palm. The guy was sad after all. After all, he did not understand what he did because all three women were angry at him. In particular, the guy was nervous what would happen if Yuan Yuan would avoid him. However, the guy did not expect that the police were following him right now. Main Fan asked the deputy what happened and why Chen Feng turned out to be closed in the warehouse. The man calmly smoked a cigar and said that this is a rather serious question, and it is difficult for him to answer him. After that, he turned on the cameras and told her to look at what was happening. Looking at the monitors, Meng Fan wondered, really? He really thinks that he was a universal object of adoration. The deputy did not expect such a violent reaction from his subordinate and looked at the girl's face. It turned out that the whole face of the girl was covered with a red shade with shame and embarrassment. The man overturned his chair and laughed. He said that he realized that she also liked this guy. Main Fan got even more angry and shouted to his boss about what he was talking about here, but he told her to calm down and said that he was just envious. The man smiled and asked what kind of attitude to the authorities. However, immediately after that, the very path that he gave to the girl flew to his head. Main Fan grabbed his neck and said to poke his nose less. The woman said that she had never seen him in a police station and asked him really who forgot who the boss was here. The man of despair decided to call her the very boss. Main Fan said that he believed that they were not familiar, and if her father was here, he would say that he was now very lucky because he became the capital of the country's first special forces. Immediately after that, the girl began to ask even more uncomfortable questions to the guy. The man squinted and with a serious expression on his face said that it was confidential. Main Fan and the deputy looked at each other piercingly with a look, without saying anything. The first gazed. The deputy said that everything was in order and asked if she really wanted to help him. He corrected his hair and said that his real goal is Chen Feng. Main Fan did not expect such a statement from her colleague and looked at him perplexedly. The man said that to be more precise, he was in love with him and intends to turn him into his informant. After that, he asked the girl to help her in this. She said that he was just an ordinary person and recently graduated from college. Main Fan asked what tasks he could help him fulfill. When the girl asked why he simply burns the protagonist in the pit, the guy only laughed. The man said that he was already in a large pit and squinted. The deputy said that despite the fact that in order to provoke an international killer, even if you are an unusual person, a miracle. The deputy considered the protagonist as a dead man, because most likely he will not even be able to get out. The man smiled and said that in this way he just decided to help him. He looked again at the protagonist. Main Fan asked if it was supported by whether he was qualified enough, and the man said that his mission on this trip was to make sure that Chen Feng is quite qualified and worth saving him. Hearing such cruel words, the girl asked how he could say this, while the man said that their goals are the same, but the tasks are different. Feng Xiaomin at the same time carried out cosmetic procedures. All three girls who were in the room and lay with masks understood that there are three girls who are uneven to the main character. Feng Xiaomin turned to Sun Jiani and said that she gave the head of the main character, and therefore she was so tense and she was very worried that she did not join her, so she told her to leave. Feng Xiaomin understood that she could not smile. Sun Jiani said that fortunately she reacts quickly enough and Chen Feng was not such a person. The woman said that she was a small fox, and they have the opportunity to compete honestly and better not to get confused under the other people's legs. And at the same time, she only thought about what could not laugh. Yuan Yuan breathed out and said that she really knew how many main characters are good, and it costs their competition. The girl understood that she had a trite mood. Both girls looked at Yuan Yuan and said to take it and go to what the girl did not agree. At the same time, the weather was terrible on the street. A loud thunder sounded and lightning appeared in the sky. Suddenly, the monitors who showed the protagonist also bent, and main fan deputies instantly realized that something had changed. Feng Xian, who opened her eyes widely, could not get rid of the same feeling. Chen Feng looked up and wondered how the lamp could swing like that in itself. However, immediately after that, the guy heard an unknown creak. For the sake of his own safety, the guy immediately activated his divine eye. Taking a closer look, the guy noticed that the whole mansion was covered with thin threads, and who instantly exploded loudly in the mansion of the protagonist. Immediately after this, another thunder sounded and lightning appeared. The girls were very scared and asked what kind of noise it was. Immediately after that, they got up. Main fan and the deputy were immediately scared. By pressing several keys, the man realized that the camera in the warehouse was broken. Main fan instantly left the room and began to scream his name. The girl came out and noticed the huge ruins, still being in Feng Xiaomin's mask. She rushed forward to save the main heroes, while the deputy said to calm down and not go there because this could provoke a second collapse, which would be more dangerous for the protagonist. Main fan immediately called the Centurion number. 30 minutes later, in the middle of the deep night, the life of the rescuers arrived. A loud cry sounded like someone found the protagonist. Rescuers, along with the lanterns, dismantled the wreckage. There they saw the protagonist whose clothes were all torn. The protagonist was crushed by several concrete beams, and they asked Li Chenfeng still alive. All the girls gathered around the guy and began to worry about his condition. However, unexpectedly, the deputy noticed something remarkable. As if zombie Chen Feng was not in a healthy state, tore his clothes with a loud cry. There was a huge tattoo on his chest. At the same time, the guy was able to free himself from all the wreckage that begged him, while rescuers were clearly surprised. Chen Feng is not able to control himself and froze, trembling. Immediately after that, the guy seemed to fall off again to the ground. Chen Feng turned out the very next day in the hospital. Yuan Yuan asked Sun Jiani whether this hospital was good, while a woman begged the protagonist to wake up as soon as possible. The deputy exhaled the smoke of cigarettes. Main fan said that this was not an accident, and there was no product in the warehouse that could cut these injuries. She wondered what kind of attack it was. Main fan looked at the protagonist. The guy had his hair and he looked as if not alive. Main fan believed that Chen Feng lied to her because he was actually one of those killers. The girl said that all this happened due to the fact that she saw a mark on his chest. The girl immediately remembered that the same mark was on the chest of that killer. She squeezed her teeth and literally cried because she could not believe that it was so impudent lies. She wondered if they were her acquaintances. Nevertheless, the deputy only smoked a cigar and said not to worry, because it is possible not what it seems. Main fan said that this is not the same, and he is really too good in disguise. She said something that happens in reality is evidence of his suspicious person. She literally screamed, because if not so, she absolutely could not explain the mark on his chest. After some time, the girl calmed down and asked the deputy whether he knew that this was a note. The man was about to speak, but he was interrupted. The man was hit with a good kick on the head. The nurse said that they have too high self-esteem, and this is a city hospital. The woman asked, did they not know that it was impossible to smoke here? Grabbing the guy by the ear, the woman led him out of the room and said to get out, for which he only apologized. At the same time, Chen Feng looked like he was sleeping silently. Suddenly, his face began to be covered with sticky sweat. I remembered what happened on that rainy night. Then the guys surrounded many threads. These same threads literally ruined the entire warehouse located there. The guy opened his eyes wide because he could not believe what was happening. Immediately after that, a huge amount of antiques fell to the floor and instantly crashed. Chen Feng did not understand what was happening and could only protect himself with his hands. The guy began to step back, but unexpectedly noticed something for himself. Chen Feng then covered his eyes wide. The bloodthirsty Georgie was in the air and soared thanks to her threads. Chen Feng asked who she was. The girl opened her red eyes and said that his fear excites her greatly. The girl laughed and told the main character to finally die. Immediately after that, the guy received another wound and shouted loudly. His body literally pierced many threads of his cuts into pieces. However, what no one expected is so that the body of the protagonist will be covered with a golden radiance. The bloodthirsty Georgie also did not expect this and froze in a stupor. Around the protagonist seemed to form an ephemeral shield. The energy was enveloped in his body and began to dance. Suddenly, for himself, the guy realized that he was not at all as wounded as he expected. Behind the guy was the same old man who gave him a bracelet and put his hand on his shoulder. The men smiled and said that they met again. The bloodthirsty Georgie immediately noticed who it was and looked angry at the man. A huge amount of energy concentrated in the old man's hands, and he put his hand on the shoulder of the protagonist. At the same time, the girl called his name, Gao Xuandin. The protagonist seemed to have enveloped that very energy, and the guy was very surprised. This energy formed the ephemeral dragon who headed for the girl. The guy did not expect that a huge amount of energy would pour out the entire warehouse from his body. The girl called the old man and said that he was full of a surprise. Suddenly, the girl seemed to dissolve, and she said that this is not the end and she would wait for him in hell. Immediately after that, the same mark appeared on the chest of the protagonist. At the same time, the dragon freed himself from the room. Immediately after that, he provoked the same explosion. And only after that, Chen Feng woke up and opened his eyes wide. Alice very soon ended up in the cathedral and broke her hatred at all passers-by. The boss understood that it was a pervert recouped on all his people. At the same time, there were many limbs and bodies of soldiers on the floor. The girl was in the arms of her father, who was sitting in an incomprehensible tone. She said that this smelly old man was mocking her. When sobbing in two streams, the girl said that she wants to take revenge on this old man for everything. Gu Luxi smiled and asked the old man has a weapon. The subordinate said that they did not expect that in 500 years he would decide to break his oath and use the forbidden equipment in the ranch. The man said that this is still a little illogical because they know everything about the main character. He is a full zero and ordinary mortals who definitely can't spend so much energy on him. Gu Luxi smiled and said that everyone is becoming more and more interesting and he does not need to worry about it. The man said that if he considers this guy an important chess figures, then they will simply throw her away. The man said that, regardless of the situation, he is already protected by Gao Xuandin and even Miss. However, Gu Luxi said not to worry and spread news about sacred religions. The man said that collectors who will come to the trading street can steal them and asked if it would be harder to get them. However, Gu Luxi smiled and said that all that they need was the effect of surprise. The man said simply to use this and let them fight because they will use the advantage of fishermen. The subordinate agreed to look at the decision of his boss. Suddenly, the girl made a stripped grimace and said that she also wants to go because people had not yet played enough. The caring father stroked the girl on the head and told her not to worry about, because the most funny would definitely remain her. After that, a loud laughter sounded in the cathedral. At the same time, a pleasant atmosphere reigned in the hospital. Sun Jiani and Yuan Yuan looked relieved at the protagonist and said that they believed that he had died. Chen Feng smiled and said he was in order. Immediately after this, Feng Xiaomin hugged a guy who began to scream in pain. The girl only said that she thought she would be home. Suddenly, the door to the ward opened. Main Fan immediately went there and went to the guy with a slight gait. The girl sharply grabbed a gun from her jacket. Having directed the barrel at the protagonist, Main Fan stopped. Chen Feng clearly did not expect such a development of events. Main Fan, with a gloomy expression on her face, said that if Chen Feng would not tell the truth, then she would release a bullet right in his head. The girl asked him who he was. Main Fan squinted, and drops of sweat flowed down her face. At the same time, the expression on the face of the protagonist was extremely calm and serene. The girl was literally furious and asked the protagonist what kind of ties with the killers he had there and why they want to kill him. The woman said that she is with them at the same time, and he is also dangerous or not. Chen Feng was perplexed from such a girl's conclusion. Chen Feng, but already understood that he admitted, however, since no one believed him, but he himself could not believe in this. The guy did not know that he should tell friends who care about him so much. The hand that held the gun trembled. Main Fan literally cried and could not believe in such an innocent face. She felt guilty. Immediately after that, the sound of a shot sounded. All other girls in the ward were instantly scared because they realized that the police shot the innocent. However, unexpectedly, Main Fan began to juggle his gun as if this fright and said that she did not shoot. Everyone else began to tremble, still not able to think sensibly. The deputy went to the ward and apologized for accidentally dropping the cola jar. Chen Feng apologized to the officer and asked her to trust. Chen Feng said that the things that he said as if the fairy tale is actually pure truth. The girl blushed and looked silently at the protagonist. The deputy wondered what the Kazan was talking about. The Kazan really hid these important clues. Yuan Yuan said that Chen Feng is just his sacrifice to be suspected. The girl said that she knows him from high school and he simply cannot be a bad guy. Suddenly, a call came to the officer's phone. The girl picked up the phone and heard the leader of the group was found with the bracelet. She was clearly surprised and asked if it was really true that they found him. Nevertheless, further news about the death of people clearly forced the girl to enter a stupor. Main Fan left the room and said to call the forensics to search for evidence on the spot, and she will be there soon. The girl grabbed the deputy's tie and said to protect the protagonist, because if something goes wrong, the girl kills him. The deputy laughed and said that she was angry with the guy, joyfully said that he was here in order to report that Chen Feng could be discharged, and asked Li all the rest. Very soon, a huge crowd of people gathered on the street of antiques. Many whispered that a murder occurred in a certain place. The time in the middle of this market was a remarkable treasure of which the same bracelet was. People in special costumes and with cameras began to search for a place for evidence. As soon as Main Fan turned out to be in place, she said to report the situation and asked what with the bodies. One of the employees said that the dead are inside. It was reported that there were 2 dead bodies. It was a couple of owners of an antique store. The girl looked at their bodies and thought about what was the cause of their death. The employee said that, judging by the pipe harassment, they died last night, and the cause of death is a little strange. The man said that she was interesting because there are no scars on the body. There was a round wound on the chest with a diameter of 2 centimeters, and given the bleeding, it should have become fatal early. It was said that in this situation, only autopsy will help to find out something. However, the officer was surprised and asked why she considers it strange. The employee that this is strange because early, not like a gunshot wound, and if the wound is so great, then the power of the weapon should be just huge. The man said that the bullet was supposed to penetrate the body, but here it did not happen. Main fan asked whether this was really a gunshot wound. The girl noticed that there were no signs of the struggle and asked what weapons could instantly kill two people except the pistol. After that, one of the employees picked up a bracelet and said that this necklace was found in the lobby, and the money of this store was lying still. That is, this murder was not for the robbery. Main fan put her hand in her lips, deeply thought. There were many questions in the girl's head which still had no answers. Main fan said to convey this to the expert in order to convince him of his authenticity, and the employee agreed. The woman asked a forensic medical examination to take fingerprints of the protagonist on him before leaving. Very soon, many people crowded near the antique store of the protagonist with the car. Feng Xiaomin and Yuan Yuan immediately noticed this and wondered why so many people are at home. As it turned out, all these men were buyers of this store. They accused the girl of bearing responsibility for this and said to compensate for her losses. The main character at the same time could not say a word. The deputy said that they had already driven up to the house and asked why the guy did not go out. The man asked what he could do with those who oppress the money and said that his abilities are not a problem here. One of the auctions said that they were regular customers, so he believed that her family could give us such valuable goods. After that, other buyers stood up for the man. Yuan Yuan said that an accident occurred and the family should be responsible for this. The girl saw all the buyers that they would receive compensation in the near future and asked to be patient and give them at least a little time. Nevertheless, everyone was indignant because they said that this was not a matter of time, and the family fell into decay since her father died. They were afraid that such a little thing as she could not afford such money. Many threatened her with the fact that she would not even go into the house until she pays them. At the same time, Sunjiani closed some kind of suspicion. Yuan Yuan was still trying to make them believe that she would pay. Sunjiani stood up for the girl and said that they should understand how much they demand and asked if their family could not allow it. The woman said that she is a new family partner and she is here in order to pay for the entire amount. The man said that he knows her as a major manager of the company Jindin. The man said that in fact he collaborated with their family in order to check it and they hope for compensation. The woman closed her eyes and said to stop trembling in vain and show her everything, because she knows how much it is all. The girl noticed that there are tan sankai, blue and white porcelain, square tripods reset, and much more. The men said that she is an expert and they will not use them in their interests, therefore altogether costs 30 million. From such a huge figure could not help but strain. Yuan Yuan could not restrain her tears and said that these goods could be defective or they simply could not be so expensive. This girl said that all of them with defects have no commercial value. She said that they can only be transferred for free for the museum to study culture. However, the man was clearly disagreeable with this distribution and said that they themselves ruined the goods, therefore they say that he was defective. The man said that she has no evidence at all and so far they are not at all. She does not have the right to blame all the blame on them. Hearing such a statement by Yuan Yuan widely opened her eyes from despair. Sunjiani opened her eyes widely because she also could not believe that she had just heard. The former buyer smiled broadly and said that their expression of persons is evidence and said to drag the money. Of course, someone grabbed this man by his head. As it turned out, Chen Feng was still in white clothes before the girls. With a gloomy expression on his face, he said not to intimidate the girls. Grabbing the protagonist by the hand, the man asked if he wants to beat him all. They are not afraid of him. At the same time, he could not believe that Chen Feng is so strong. However, at the same time, a deputy came out of the car who shouted to the main character, he really forgot that he exists. Immediately after this, Chen Feng received his fist in the face from the deputy. The man instantly put on handcuffs on the guy. Immediately after that, the man folded the protagonist on the ground and turned to visitors. He told them to be honest. The guy asked what was really happening here, and you looked at him with surprised faces. The man said not to panic because he is from the police. Clients said that they came here only to demand debts, and they did nothing illegal. The man said not to understand him incorrectly because he does not control such civil disputes, and he is a criminal who is engaged only in murders. The crowd did not understand what he had in mind. After that, the man looked at the captured protagonist and said that he was a suspect in the murder, because of which he had been following a long time. The man said that they suspect that he had already taken 25 lives, and each victim died terribly. The man said that some corpses were not even found. She said that he was not at all like a killer. The deputy said that no one would suspect each person, because the most obvious feature is that these sacrifices argued with him, and even before their death, and they were antique. The crowd was immediately scared of her life. The man said that he was weak, but he was a cunning face with high intellect, so that he did not even leave any traces at the crime scene. The man said that he could only temporarily detain him and let go through no more than 48 hours. The guy advised to stop arguing with him because he is abnormal, so he will not be responsible for his consequences. Immediately after that, Chen Feng got up and looked at the arrivals with a gloomy expression. Then, on the face, the antique said to forget what they had just said. However, the guy with a gloomy face said that it was too late and he just already remembered them. After that, the crowd ran and said that they did not need any debts from Yuan Yuan. The guy smiled and thanked the deputy for the fact that he helped him. The whole guy clearly did not expect this. The deputy exhaled and said not to be so sweet. The man said that, in fact, he simply could not watch how many beautiful girls mock so cruelly. The guy opened his hands and said that such beauties did not need to pay 40 million and asked Li stunning. However, he met only awkward silence and irritated faces. Immediately after that, the guy closed his eyes. The man took out his notebook and began to record what was happening. However, immediately after this, the girls literally exploded and began to blame the deputy. Meanwhile, a beautiful atmosphere reigned late at night. Chen Feng lay in the spare room of the family under the blanket. The guy squeezed the very jade figure in his hands and wondered why she chose him. The guy suggested that, if not for Chen Feng, then in this fire, this jade lion would be dead. Chen Feng understood that nevertheless, the power that he gave changed everything that he had ever seen, and what happened since then becomes more and more exaggerated. The guy closed his eyes and realized that the people around him, people who are not indifferent to him, could not cope with this. Chen Feng fell asleep, repeated the name Yuan Yuan. At the same time, in an unknown area there was extremely vague weather. A certain female hand stretches forward against water clouds. A beautiful girl stroked the jade lion and stood near him. Looking into her eyes, they horrified Feng Xiaomin. Nevertheless, when Chen Feng saw her, he could not think about anything except her beautiful eyes. Suddenly, the guy seemed to dawn because he felt a pleasant and warm feeling. However, immediately after that, a pleasant sensation grew into a sharp pain in the eye. Thunder sounded and lightning appeared in the red sky. The guy watched the deceased bodies of Yuan Yuan, Sun Jiani, and could not believe it. The dying son, Johnny, begged the protagonist to help her while she was bleeding. Waking up from this dream, Chen Feng shouted loudly the word "No." The guy barely woke up in a cold sweat. However, immediately after that, he opened his eyes wide. What the guy did not expect, so that right in the same bed was a deputy next to him. The man asked he really wants it. Also, Chen Feng literally jumped out of the bed and asked what he wanted. The deputy calmly rose and took a cigarette out of his pocket. With a malicious smile, he asked if he wanted to leave or wants to stay for a minute. Chen Feng asked for any consumption why he should leave. The man asked for him. For him, this is not obvious because of which the guy is in jeopardy and all his loved ones are in danger. The man squinted and looked in a certain direction. As it turned out, he looked at the hand. the main character who squeezed the jade lion. The man tried to start a conversation about the fact that he was in his hands, but Chen Feng said that this was just a small, worthless artifact. However, the man closed his eyes and said that he hates this feeling of throwing cards and said to lay out everything. The man asked when the tattoo on his hand merged with him. The guy opened his eyes wide because he did not expect a man to check his own body. Coming close to the face of the protagonist, whether he asked if he controls his strength. Chen Feng was still trying to expose himself a fool and said that he had no idea what he was talking about. However, the deputy could only grin, his face instantly gloomy, and he said that he could not just leave it. After that, he took out a pistol for a moment and directed the barrel at the protagonist. The guy activated his Eye of God and noticed something amazing. As it turned out, there were no bullets in the clip of the pistol. Chen Feng specially approached the gun, and the deputy asked where the guy had such confidence. The man closed his eyes and asked, he really does not think that this gun could kill him because the guy just managed to escape from the killer. However, after that, the guy rummaged in his hand. He squeezed his hand and said that if he does not admit, he would die. The man smiled but still did not show what was in his hand. Chen Feng activated his Eye of God. Suddenly for himself, the guy realized that he could not identify what is in his hand. Suddenly, the guy felt warmth in his chest. A mysterious golden symbol appeared in the hand of the protagonist. This symbol published this huge amount of heat and light that an immediate reaction was received. The guy began to tear off his clothes, and his sign was again lit up with red light. In the middle of all this, Chen Feng could not help but scream. At that moment, Chen Feng knelt down. The guy was hardly able to hold his eyes open and only trembled in pain. He asked what the deputy did with him. The deputy opened his eyes wide and said that the guy initially knew that he was not a simple cop, and either he answers a question or dies. Chen Feng tightened into a lump and asked if he was hitting him, and since such a thing, he agrees to this. He could not understand why he was asking so many questions. Nevertheless, the deputy said that he was not in conspiracy with those killers who are trying to kill him. The guy remembered how he even saved his life. This all happened the very moment when there was a skirmish with a sniper. The man took on the roof of the building where the sniper was located and found him still alive. The boss said that if his boss has a new order, then he will return first, and if he does not die today, then he could not even dare to return. The sniper could not help but he understood that his position was revealed to him. He needed to change it as soon as possible. However, unexpectedly for himself, the man felt behind him, I think, the gun. The deputy directed the gun at the sniper and told him to throw weapons. However, unexpectedly for himself, this sniper was much more agile than the man expected. With a sharp movement of his hand, he caused a serious wound with a knife, and a gun was from his hands. Immediately after this, the sniper set the bandwidth to the already falling deputy. Immediately after that, he crashed onto the roof with a roar. Sniper took his own gun and took it out of the holster. The man immediately began to shoot his pursuer and leaked a whole clip, and the deputy successfully rolled and was able to avoid all the wounds.